Hello and welcome, Greg, or the peer review. And like I said, Dr. Peer review, or I guess Dr. Greg. I don't actually know what title you prefer at this point, but shout out to you. Thank you so much for passing by. I am, in fact, doing well. I hope you are too. Now that you're hopefully done with academia, I assume that's probably an improvement of your quality of life. I can only assume or hope. Oh, and Shy, welcome. And also, shout out to Greg and their YouTube channel. Go subscribe to them. And also shout out to Shy. If I could do this properly. You can see now why I struggle to mod. Who just finished doing a rave stream. A super intense rave stream. At like, I was even just tired and worn out just watching and observing, and the occasional modding that I do. But you should definitely give them a follow, for some great vibes, great workouts, great community, just yeah, all around great. I can't say enough. And also, like, as a bonus, you know, just gonna put it out there, since I mod for them, you know, you just like pass by and tell me to add push-ups to the workout. I will do it, and they'll act. No, I'm joking, they won't do it. But I do sometimes randomly add push-ups, but I do take them away. And I'm not gonna lie, I definitely drop the ball sometimes on the modding, for sure. My multitasking definitely needs some improvement, or maybe that's some sign of some cognitive decline. But yeah, that rave stream was fantastic, and like, you know, hopefully that makes a reoccurrence somewhere. You know, obviously you can't do it every single day because, you know, it's not going to be as special, but I think if you make it as like a regular goal, every like once every 3 or 4 months, or like every 6 months, I think, yeah, it'll just like build and build. And I hope, like I said, you get the rest and recovery that you need. And I'm also sorry to hear that you have adulting to do. Adulting is never fun. At least not in my experience. Maybe that's why, whatever, I don't consider myself an adult. But maybe one day it'll happen. But yeah, I'm back. I originally intended to stream yesterday, but I didn't. I actually had like an extended workout session at whatever, on the topic of workouts, and like left me a little bit tired. And I focused on more or less like creating content. And I've now created sort of a graphics for my stream schedule that I post in the Discord. So I'm giving that a try of like posting my schedule beforehand, and hopefully I actually like live up to that, but no promises. And yeah, on today's stream, got lots of things to cover, starting with some health and fitness stuff. Since the workout streams are on the back burner for now, that I'm trying to resurrect, I'm still going to cover some health and fitness content. And actually, it's also one of the main topics in the stream title, of like, you know, exercise effects on the brain, or like maybe, you know, the effects of exercise on the brain may have been overhyped, or still kind of an open question and not as conclusive as we once thought they were. this is not to say that exercise isn't beneficial. Totally, like, the evidence is there that you can exercise, get the minimum recommendations of exercise. It's a good thing. Whole host of benefits. It's mostly just focused on, exercise effects on the brain. Still maybe a little bit of a question mark when it comes to that. We're gonna dive right into it, starting with actual exercise research, where, again, even though I'm gonna be covering how, again, exercise effects on the brain, maybe we don't know as much as we thought we did, but still, the evidence is clear that exercise does have multiple benefits, and maybe you don't need some huge large dose of exercise to get the beneficial effects. And Tetsu Paul, welcome. Thank you so much for passing by, and also great to see you again, since I obviously just saw you a little bit while ago in Shy stream. But shout out to you as well. Also great vibes. And also Tetsu not only does workout streams, does in real life hiking, kayaking, and they set really intense goals, workout goals for themselves. And I hope, the one-arm chin-up is coming along. That's always been like a really long-term goal for me, of being able to do a one-arm whatever chin-up or pull-up. Of like, there was a long time ago, I had like the ability to like struggle to like push out one-arm chin-up. But that's long. Those days are long gone. But I'm hoping to get back into it. I'm still like trying to master the handstand before adding on too much. Yeah, it's actually pretty common for me. It's a good testament to the use it or lose it sort of issue of like, I'll set a goal for myself, and then like I'll essentially like accomplish it, or like, just barely accomplish it, as in like the one-arm chin-up, like, I can do like one, and it takes everything in me, like my full 110% to do my one-arm chin-up, and then I like move on to something else, and then now I could like no longer do it. And like same thing with like muscle-ups, where it's like, at one time muscle-ups, although maybe I still can, I just haven't tried. But I'm hoping that, once I master the handstands, like, I don't lose that. Like, I continued to actually practice them. But yeah, these are all tricky things. And I'm looking forward to that day sometime soon, that you're going to be doing your own one-arm chin-up, Tetsu Paul. I have no doubt that's on the horizon, based off of the progress that I see happening. But yeah, so you might not need, like, huge amounts of exercise to at least, lower your risk of cancer. So this was published not that long ago. I think, a few days ago. Where just like 5 minutes, but this is like a vigorous, intermittent lifestyle physical activity. So yeah, it might be like a short amount of time, but maybe it has to be like way more intense to get the benefits. So a new study looked at the effects of a vigorous, intermittent lifestyle physical activity on cancer risk. Researchers tracked the daily vigorous activity of about 22,400 non-exercisers using data from wrist-worn accelerometers and monitored their health records for cancer for almost 7 years. Compared with no VIPLA, 4.5 minutes of VILPA a day accrued through 1-minute bursts of activity was associated with up to a 32% reduced cancer risk. So, I would say that this is just like my casual opinion of like, pretty minimal investment. I would say you're getting pretty substantial benefits or reduction in cancer risk. I don't know how this translates into absolute risk, but just like by the numbers, 32% less of something. I would say it's pretty decent given the amount of investment. So I'm going to put your handle, so I'm going to start. So totally, I went through the exact same thing, Tetsu, where, you bench, obviously, I bench, I've been benching for a long time, and, I can bench way more or at least a decent amount more than my body weight. And so I thought my wrists were at least, you know, had some decent amount of strength. But once I started doing handstands, like I was quickly confronted with reality of like, oh, just holding my body weight for like 10, 15 seconds and doing just like 3 rounds of that, like really does a number on your wrists. And I totally had to like build up more and more wrist strength to like be able to do it or to hold it now. Totally a wake-up call. And same thing with like, so to take anything that I say about practicing or mastering handstands with a grain of salt, since I clearly haven't mastered them yet, although I feel like I'm close. Or at least maybe not mastering, but at least regularly doing them successfully. But yeah, also wrist finger strength, or like pretty much, at least I've had to like really learn that I have to like really press my fingers into the floor. At least for me, that's what I've learned. That seems to have paid off. But again, like all I'm saying is maybe try it out for yourself and see how it feels. And same thing with like hand placement. I've sort of been regularly experimenting with that, of like, at least for me, I tend to be able to better balance with a narrower hand placement, as in basically I think too wide is less optimal. I think I'm just throwing these out there of like things to try, to experiment with, that I have found a decent amount of success with. Where was I? Yeah, exactly. Like, I think, this is just me, like pretty much just like the width of your actual shoulders, just like your hands straight down, seems to be kind of like the sweet spot for me. Or maybe just like a little bit, like a touch narrower than shoulder width. Again, for me. And even just like the angle of like your fingers, of like, I found a little bit greater success of when my fingers are like, they're a little bit spread out, but not like too spread out. Basically, they're more or less like, you know, my fingers are pointed like forward. Which sort of makes sense in that at the end of the day, like your fingers or your hands are supposed to be replacing your feet, right? And so it's like, just as your toes are generally pointed forward, your fingers should generally be pointed forward. At least that's what I have found to have so far improved my ability. Again, take anything that I say with a grain of salt. But those are sort of like the small tweaks that I've attempted that appear to have paid off, or at least I feel like I can balance myself a lot better and with greater consistency. I mean, really, you know, on the topic of science like this, I'm really trying to apply the scientific method to my handstands. I'm just like trying a bunch of random stuff and seeing whether it works or not. You know, that is ultimately what science is. Just trial and error. Right now, I'm or at least for the longest time, it was mostly error, and now I'm getting a little bit of success. So I'm like, okay, try this a little bit. Seems to work, and I try and go with that. Where was I? Yeah. Everyday life offers plenty of opportunities to be physically active at a vigorous level, including stair climbing, carrying groceries, and power walking. Yeah, exactly. I will gladly do all the handstands for science. Physical activity is an important facet of overall health and well-being. Research shows that regular exercise can lower the risk of chronic conditions such as cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and cancer. Indeed, the World Health Organization states that people who are insufficiently active have a 20 to 30% higher risk of death compared to people who are sufficiently active. Although the importance of physical activity is abundantly clear, around 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men worldwide do not follow the recommendation for moderate intensity exercise for at least 150 minutes or vigorous intensity exercise for 75 minutes each week. So basically, you know, you should be aiming for around like 20 minutes a day of moderate intensity exercise. And actually, interestingly enough, 1 in 3 and 1 in 4 I mean, yeah, that actually makes sense. I think I've never actually calculated how much whatever moderate intensity exercise that I get. I'm pretty sure I meet the 150. No, actually, pretty confident that I do. Assuming, if someone tells me that my running sessions are low intensity, it's going to be a huge wake up call for me. But I'm not actually measuring my heart rate when I do running. So maybe for all I know, my running sessions are actually walking sessions, and I'm just a big baby. But it is around 20 minutes a day. So, I think just a little bit greater than walking, or like a light jog, I guess. I know that moderate intensity has a specific definition, but I can't remember it offhand. But yeah, if you want to cut down the time, 75 minutes of vigorous intensity. But I think that's understandably a pretty high bar for a lot of people. A new study brings good news for people who do not like or cannot do structured, vigorous exercise. Based on wrist-worn accelerometer measurements of about 22,000 non-exercising adults gathered via the UK Biobank, just 4.5 minutes per day of vigorous intensity physical activity performed in 1-minute bursts were associated with, that lower reduced risk of cancer. And I'm pretty sure, Shy, that your rave session, that's like, that right there, that was like a full 3 hours of, in my mind, that was at least moderate to vigorous intensity. You definitely went more than 150 minutes. We have the VOD to back it up. And then I'm pretty sure it's more on the, vigorous intensity aspect. So, I think at least for this week, you totally met that benchmark. And yeah, so running is super tricky. And I have kind of a really long history with running, where for the longest time, I hated... didn't hate, but I strongly disliked running. But that dislike stemmed from the fact that, running was painful for me. Running just, destroyed my lower body. With, shin splints, just, actual mild swelling in my shins, in addition to, pain and discomfort. And then, after each running session, I would need to, pretty much my lower body was useless for the next 2 days or 3 days, where I had to really recover quite a bit for my next running session. And so, as is typical, at least for me, of when I encounter difficulty, at least when it comes to exercise, I try to push through, of okay, even though this running is a miserable experience and is painful, or at the very least very uncomfortable, I'm just gonna try to push through it. Obviously that didn't, no surprise, that didn't work out. And it just got worse and worse. So once, pretty much, it was too painful, or clearly this isn't working, and each running session was miserable for me. I was okay, I gotta stop, and reassess, and try to find out, what's the problem, what am I doing wrong, and just as what I said with the handstands, I had to try a bunch of things. I had to go into the research and actually, find out that there's research, about proper running technique. Oh, there's nothing to apologize for, guy, at all. You believe me, adulting should take priority. Yeah, nothing to apologize for. You deserve all the rest and recovery that you can get after the adulting, which I know is never fun. But yeah, once I realized that I was totally running incorrectly, and that there is an actual, proper way to run with running shoes, and then through a bunch of experimentation, I was and not running through pain, just I know all these concepts of progressive overload. These are these are second nature to me, but it's always the case of easier said than done, or knowing the right and proper way is different than actually doing it. But I actually had to apply the principles that I know for myself, actually apply them to myself. The principles that I teach others or have coached others They're like, oh, maybe I should actually coach myself better. Once I did that, like, it was a long process where, you know, I pretty much went back to basics of like, I'm just gonna run until I have a little bit of discomfort, and then like just stop. Not gonna push through it. And it was literally like my running sessions would be like, you know, 2 or 3 minutes of running, and then I just do some light walking for the rest of it. Then it's like slowly built up of like, you know, 2 or 3 minutes, and then like, you know, 3.5 minutes, and then like now, running is actually enjoyable for me, and I actually like do feel functional. Now it's before I would kind of like dread running. Now I actually like look forward to it, and like I almost like can't do without it because I sort of like rely on it for my mental health and well-being. But I absolutely know that running is not for everybody, and totally I don't blame anybody, given my experience, for like not taking up running. It's like there is like a barrier to entry, and totally like, at least for me, I don't mind running on a treadmill, but I totally understand that people don't like running on a treadmill because like it totally can be boring, or you have to find ways to entertain yourself. And like if you want to run outdoors, like here in Quebec, like I'm not brave enough to run in the winter. I know that there are people that run in the winter. I'm not one that run outside in the winter. So like if you're limited by weather, yeah, like even though running it looks like it's accessible, not the most accessible, I don't think. Where was I? Yeah, the study was led by Dr. Emmanuel, professor of physical activity, lifestyle, and population health at the University of Sydney, Australia, and published in JAMA Oncology. We need to further investigate this link through robust trials, but it appears that vigorous, intermittent, what was it? Lifestyle physical activity, yeah. Oh yeah, it's right here. May be a promising, cost-free recommendation for lowering cancer risk in people who find structured exercise difficult or unappealing. And you know, pretty much, maybe this is like a solution of what I was just saying. Oh, like maybe you don't need to run for like 20, 30 minutes in the dead of winter. Maybe I can just get away with like running for like, you know, 2 minutes. It's probably going to be a pretty intense session. But yeah, maybe it doesn't need to be like a torture for yourself. Dr. Stamatakis and his collaborators coined the term vigorous intermittent lifestyle physical activity, VILPA, to refer to short bouts of physical activities that are part of our lifestyle, daily living. Examples of VILPA include, but are not limited to, walking uphill, climbing stairs, maximizing walking pace for a short distance, so for instance 100 to 200 meters, to reach a vigorous intensity, also known as power walking. Carrying children, make sure that you know, that they're your own children or you have consent. I definitely not condone or advocate for carrying other people's children without their consent. Groceries for 5 to 100 meters, vigorous housework. Yeah, a little is better. I think we're slowly kind of like figuring that out. And I personally wouldn't want to like dispel that myth. I think many people think that, you know, you need 45, like if you can't set aside 45 minutes to an hour to exercise, well then like don't bother. But I think more and more we're finding out that, you know, even just like small doses spread out throughout the day, and we're even finding out, at least from here, that, you know, even just like it's like 5 minutes, or like specifically 4.5 minutes spread out in 1 minute sessions, there is some benefit to that. And as they say, it can be incorporated into like your lifestyle of like, yeah, vigorous housework. And totally housework is, at least in my experience, like physical activity. VILPA is different from traditional, yeah, up to 2 minute bouts and sporadic rather than continuous and structured. The study was a prospective cohort study of adults ages between 40 to 69 years who made their data available to the UK Biobank. To assess the relationship between VILPA and cancer recurrence, the research team led by Dr. Stamatakis only included individuals from the accelerometer-wearing cohort, who reported not doing any exercise in their leisure time and taking one or fewer recreational walks per week. And so, like, they were actually measuring, their activity. This was not self-reported, physical activity levels. They were wearing those accelerometers or some sort of smart technology that's measuring their exercise or physical activity. Oh yeah, there's totally those HIIT workouts can definitely pack a punch, for sure. And that's where, yeah, like, I think a little bit of exercise, and I don't think it has to be like super high intensity, but like, yeah, it adds up over time. And as you said, with YouTube, with especially a lot of these HIIT workouts, or even just like workouts from Celtsy to Shy with minimal equipment, of like, well, we just witnessed a rave stream that I would say was like pretty intense. That you need minimal equipment. I think the glow sticks are optional. So it's just a matter of like, trying to incorporate it wherever you can. People with missing information, previous cancer, or not wearing the activity monitor properly were excluded from the study. The study population included 22,400 people with an average age of 62 years. Okay, so this is like an elderly or an older sample population. And so if they're able to do vigorous, intermittent lifestyle physical activity, then, I would hope someone, let's say half that age, should be able to do maybe a little bit more. It's not guaranteed, obviously, but I think it's fair to say that, if a large portion of 62-year-olds or older can do some vigorous intensity workouts, then I think younger people can, or at least most younger people can. Yeah, about half were women, and the majority were white. Pretty standard. During a mean follow-up period of 6.7 years, the researchers identified about 2,300 new cancer events, including cancer registration, hospitalization for cancer, or death attributed to any cancer. To classify accelerometer recorded physical activity based on intensity, vigorous, moderate, and light, the researchers used a machine learning technique called random forest. Just a few minutes of vigorous, intermittent, light lifestyle physical activity. I'm definitely gonna have to learn this acronym. Each day lowers cancer risk. Most episodes of VILPA occurred in short bursts of up to 1 or 2 minutes. On average, people engaged in VILPA for about 4.5 minutes each day, with the maximum time being 16 minutes. Okay. Statistical analyses revealed that the relationship between VILPA and cancer risk is almost linear, which means that the more VILPA a person does, the lower their risk of cancer. So yeah, I think that's pretty promising. It seems like, at least for this study, the bare minimum is 4.5 minutes, which I would say, like, that's like whatever your standard whatever song or average length of just about any song, or maybe at most 2 songs. But then, like, if you're able to go a little bit more, even just like doubling it, it seems like, as they say, is almost linear. So if you can do like 9 minutes, then it's like twice as beneficial. Compared to people who do not do any VILPA, so a minority of the study participants, 6.2%, those who did VILPA for about 4.5 minutes each day, in short bursts of up to 1 or 2 minutes, had a 20% low risk of cancer. Previous research has shown that certain types of cancer are associated with low levels of physical activity. So yeah, and these include liver, lung, kidney, pretty much, just about whatever, all the organs, or like just about most of the cancers you can think of. This study shows that the risk of these physical activity-related cancers is reduced by about 31% in people who did 4.5 minutes of VILPA daily. The researchers also identified the minimum amount of VILPA needed to significantly reduce cancer risk. Okay. So correction. It's not that 4.5 minutes is the minimum. They found that 3.4 minutes of VILPA daily can lower the total risk of cancer by 17%. I would say this is like your standard song. 3.4 minutes. While 3.6 minutes of VILPA daily can lower the risk of physical activity-related cancer by 18%. I mean, they're zooming in and trying to get high resolution. More research on the effects of VILPA on cancer needed. Medical News Today asked experts who were not involved in this study to share their thoughts on the research. Dr. David Raiklen, professor of biological sciences and anthropology at the University of Southern California, praised the high-quality study for showing that a relatively small amount of vigorous lifestyle activity can have such a strong association with reduced cancer risk. He observed that the authors use a novel machine learning-based method to identify behaviors, and this study moves the field forward, allowing us to better understand the benefits of this form of physical activity on the risk of developing cancer. Dr. Raiklen cautioned that this study cannot establish causality due to design, but this work certainly suggests that future intervention studies using VILPA are warranted. Professor Marcus Gruber, chair of training and movement science and head of the Human Performance Research Center at the University of Constance, told Medical News Today that the study confirms a long-known fact in exercise science: intensity matters. Like Dr. Raiklen, Professor Gruber pointed out that while the data, methodology, and analysis included in the study are sound, the study is cross-sectional and can only report associations between VILPA and cancer. And you know, this is essentially going to overlap with what I'm going to cover later. Even though, you know, it's about the research in regards to exercise and its effects on the brain, or potential benefit effects on the brain. Here they're sort of like talking about, you know, this study, which, you know, generally it seems like it's high quality. There's still some, you know, things to keep in mind in terms of it's not perfect. And that, yeah, it's cross-sectional and it's an association, not actually demonstrating causality. When asked about the link between VILPA and cancer incidence, Professor Gruber said that there are various potential explanations for the results that need to be tested. According to him, VILPA might directly reduce cancer risk, increase physical fitness, or indicate better physical fitness, which is associated with reduced cancer risk. VILPA might also play a role in countering age-related declines in physical fitness, and thereby influence cancer risk. Overall, Professor Gruber believes that VILPA is a promising alternative to duration-based recommendations for physical activity, especially for individuals who dislike to exercise, which, obviously, there are people out there who dislike exercise, which I'm sure for a variety of reasons. I definitely enjoy exercise. Maybe a little bit too much. Before I cover this, yeah, also some more health and fitness news. Could eating strawberries daily improve heart and brain health? Which I sort of almost eat strawberries, consume strawberries daily. I put them in my smoothies, and I have one just about daily. And even here, as we'll see, they're not using like freshly picked strawberries. They appear to be using some sort of like ground up powdered strawberry. But berries in general are considered a superfood with many health benefits. Past studies have shown that berries help ease inflammation and help protect certain areas of the body, such as the gut microbiome and cardiovascular system. San Diego State University researchers say eating an equivalent of 2 servings of strawberries daily can help improve cognitive function, lower blood pressure, and increase a person's antioxidant capacity. Generally speaking, berries are considered a superfood. That is because all berries, including acai berries, blueberries, blackberries, and raspberries, provide numerous health benefits. Previous studies have found that consuming berries can help ease inflammation and oxidative stress, which can be triggers for many. Other studies have linked berry consumption to benefiting and protecting certain areas of the body, including the gut microbiota, nervous system, cardiovascular system, and immune system. Now, new research from San Diego State University says eating strawberries every day can help improve cognitive function, lower blood pressure, and increase a person's antioxidant capacity. The research was recently presented at Nutrition 2023, annual meeting of the American Society of Nutrition, and was funded by the California Strawberry Commission. So how many servings of strawberries is healthy? So one thing to, I guess, keep in mind and point out is that this wasn't some, peer-reviewed published study in an academic journal. It seems like it was just data or results presented at a conference. So, maybe a little bit of an asterisk or grain of salt associated with it. But Dr. Sheeran, a professor in the School of Exercise and Nutrition Sciences at San Diego State University and principal investigator on the study, told Medical News Today that the idea for this study came from previous research. Prior to conducting our clinical study, some of the similar effects were shown in animal studies and some human studies, but in different populations and using different study designs, he explained. For this study, Dr. Hushman and her team conducted a study with 35 healthy men and women between the ages of 66 and 78. So I was fairly, older sample of adults. Over an 8-week period each day, study participants either consumed 26 grams of freeze-dried strawberry powder, equivalent to 2 servings of fresh strawberries, or a control powder, which I'd be curious to know what this control powder is. I mean, it's some whatever. For all I know, it's just like white flour that's dyed red. But yeah, they're not consuming fresh strawberries, like some freeze-dried strawberry powder. I'm also curious, like, how they're producing that. But, like, yeah, that gives me, let's say, a little bit of reassurance that probably the frozen strawberries that I use for my smoothies, if the freeze-dried strawberry powder is good, I'm pretty sure my frozen strawberries are also good. At the end of the 8 weeks, researchers found those who ate the strawberries increased their cognitive processing speed by 5.2%. And again, taking into account that this an older population sample, which I would say, again, not an expert, but this seems pretty significant given the age group. They lower their systolic blood pressure by 3.6% and increase their antioxidant capacity by 10.2% when compared to those who took the control powder. In regards to their findings, Dr. Hushman said they expected to see improvement in antioxidant capacity as strawberries are a good source of vitamin C. They also expected to see some improvement in cognitive processing speed based on their hypothesis. Previously published research has already shown some of the acute and long-term cardiovascular health benefits of strawberries in different populations, so this is great to confirm some of those findings, Dr. Hushman said when asked about the blood pressure finding. This study demonstrates that consuming strawberries may promote cognitive function and improve cardiovascular risk factors like hypertension. We're encouraged that a simple dietary change, like adding strawberries to the daily diet, may improve these outcomes in older adults. So what makes strawberries so healthy? Is it just, the vitamin C? Because, they are a great source of vitamin C. But, you can get vitamin C from so many other fruits, or even just by taking vitamin C tablets. I think very few people in the developed world have any sort of deficiency in vitamin C. Strawberries were first grown in gardens in France in the late 18th century. However, they could be found in the wild as far back as Roman times. Today, strawberries are grown in many parts of the world, with most production occurring in the United States, Turkey, and Spain. Interestingly, although strawberries are considered a berry, they're technically an accessory or aggregate fruit because of how they grow. Strawberries contain many vitamins and minerals the body needs to stay healthy, including vitamin A, magnesium, potassium, and folate, also known as vitamin B9. Additionally, strawberries are very high in vitamin C. Eating just 8 strawberries provides the body with a steady vitamin C intake. And strawberries are known to have a large amount of antioxidants, polyphenols, and phytosterols. Polyphenols have antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties, and phytosterols aid in lowering cholesterol levels. Previous research has linked strawberry consumption to lowered risk for heart disease, diabetes, Alzheimer's disease, and even potentially help prevent cancer. So what's next for strawberry research? When asked about the plan for the next steps in research, Dr. Hushman said it would depend on acquiring future funding. But we have many great ideas for future studies to follow-ups on some of our current findings. Stay tuned. Additionally, we are currently studying the impacts of strawberries on similar and other outcomes as part of a multi-fruit intervention. After reviewing this research, Alison Tallman, a registered dietitian and founder of Nourished Routes, who was not involved in this study, told Medical News Today that what she would like to see further in strawberry-related health research. The link between strawberries and gut health, strawberries and brain health, and strawberries and heart health have been well explored. I love there to be more research on strawberries and cancer prevention since they do not have antioxidant components. So what is the healthiest way to eat strawberries? Experts recommend that most adults eat 1.5 to 2 cups of fruit each day. About 8 large strawberries are equal to 1 cup of fruit. Oh, no problem. Thank you so much for the lurk. Super appreciate it. Hope you get some great sleep. I know I can only speak for myself, but sleep is definitely, or quality sleep is a struggle for me. I hope it's not for you. But yeah, thank you so much for passing by and for the lurk. Super appreciate it. So looking for new ways to incorporate more strawberries into your diet. Considers these suggestions from Tallman. Oh yeah, smoothie to your lunch. Well, these are all pretty common sense. And like, I don't know, are there people out there that hate strawberries? I know that there are people that are allergic to strawberries, but it's hard for me to imagine that there are people out there that, let's say, you know, hate them, or they just like can't stand them. They're pretty benign. Alright, do I want to cover this now or save it for a little bit later? Yeah, I think I'm gonna go through one of my topics in semi-order. Okay, so yeah, one of the main topics in my stream title is that, you know, this LK-99 superconductor appears to be making the social media rounds. There appears to be like a lot of hype around it. So this was published a few days ago, or exactly like 2 days. Sort of like covering it, and maybe, you know, might be overhyped, or there, you know, there literally might not be anything there. Maybe fraudulent. Hard to say at this point. But first I have a video that I found, kind of explaining it.
And I feel as if a particular science story has been told. Good morning, John. It's been a very busy science week, and I feel as if a particular science story has been totally missed, but maybe, in fact, the biggest one of all of them? Like, bigger than maybe room temperature superconductors, bigger than maybe a really powerful solid tumor cancer treatment. It's hiding, and nobody's talking about it, and it is that we might now understand what caused this, which is a graph of the temperature of the surface of the North Atlantic Ocean, many different years, and that this year in red, which isn't particularly fun to look at. Like, it's scary times here on planet Earth. But before I jump into all of this, Johnny, I just want to say thank you for your lovely yesterday video. I love you too. Right. It's been quite a year, though I am happy with the current trajectory, at least. So geoengineering is this fairly controversial idea that you could intentionally change the climate of the planet. Now that is different from when you accidentally change the climate of the planet, which is just the last 100 years. This conversation is going to be a big deal. It's going to be a bigger and bigger...
oh, Base Deckhead, welcome. Thank you so much for... it would be. Although I might have been mistaken. Maybe this video is not about that. Even though the thumbnail appears to be misleading then. Let's see. Okay, no, never mind. It's not about it. Totally the thumbnail got me. But thankfully, I have an actual article written. But like, yeah, if there's like a small chance, but like, here is where, you know, if true, freaking amazing, as you say, but if false, or at least, you know, shown not to be reproducible, I would say, in my opinion, like super damaging, as in like, you know, this appears to be like published research, got past, you know, peer review. And so if after the fact, it's basically either retracted or like shown to actually be like fraudulent, then I think that's like super damaging to whatever, the broad scientific endeavor. That I think has like a lot of negative implications in terms of like long term. You know, already I think there's a lack of trust in scientific institutions, and some of that like is legitimate. But it's, again, if this actually turns out to be fraudulent, or like there's actually nothing there of substance, then I think that's just gonna like further erode public confidence in science and research, which I think that not bode well for the future. But like, yeah, claimed superconductor LK-99 is an online sensation, but replication efforts fall short. Social media is abuzz with chatter about the material, but some scientists are pushing back on the hype. Betting markets have 30%. So, and here is where, okay. I need to pretty much be honest of the fact that, like, I'm not qualified at all in evaluating this type of research. Like, I'm literally relying on other researchers to figure out what's going on. Like, as much as I would want to be able to figure out on my own whether, you know, this is fraudulent or poor quality research. Like, I'm totally not qualified at all. Like, I'm relying on stories like this. I'm relying on other scientists to be either, you know, basically thumbs up or thumbs down. But based off of like what I am reading, and again, maybe I'm reading the wrong things, totally possible. But based off on what I'm reading, like, it seems like it's even much less, like 3 to 10%. Like, it seems like, you know, basically like winning the lottery type of odds. And so if the betting markets have it at 30%, well, you know, I don't know. No, I don't know enough about betting markets to really comment on how they work. But that seems like way overhyped. A Korean team claimed to have discovered a superconductor that works at room temperature and ambient pressure, has become a viral sensation and prompted a slew of replication efforts by scientists and amateurs alike. But initial efforts to experimentally and theoretically reproduce the buzzworthy result have come up short, and researchers remain deeply skeptical. But I think it goes against how people to know study is being. True, but maybe I'm too cynical, or maybe too negative, even though I'm generally like an optimistic person. But like, do I trust people to like come to that conclusion of like, oh, whatever, this is just like a lesson in not going by one study and not like clinging to one study? I mean, if they actually learned that lesson, I think that is great. But I am a little bit skeptical. I am, as they say here, deeply skeptical that people would come away with that lesson. The research team, led by Sukbae Lee and Ji Hoon Kim at the startup firm Quantum Energy Research Center in Seoul, said in preprints published on 25 July that a compound of copper, lead, phosphorus, and oxygen, dubbed LK-99, is a superconductor to ambient pressure and temperatures above 127 degrees Celsius. The team claims that samples showed two key signs of superconductivity: zero electrical resistance and the Meissner effect, in which the material expels magnetic field, leading samples to levitate above a magnet. Previous efforts have achieved superconductivity only in certain materials under incredibly low temperatures or extremely high pressures. No material has ever been confirmed to be a superconductor under ambient conditions. And also, on the topic of, like, you know, one study, that's more or less like what I'm going to cover, well, sort of in the vein of what I'm going to cover next. Of, like, you know, this is like this is basically a review of reviews. And and this was published fairly recently, this year, a few months ago, where, you know, I covered some research on health and fitness, and physical activity, and, you know, just a little bit of physical activity has some beneficial effects on reducing your rate of cancer, multiple cancers. And then, like, you have this review article, that's, you know, it's trying to do something comprehensive. And then their conclusion overall, even though, you know, I'm going to go through it more closely, but their conclusion overall is like, hey, you know, basically not the greatest quality of evidence, and that maybe we should, like, look to do better. So LK-99's purported superconductivity drew immediate scrutiny from scientists. My first impression was no, says Ina Vishik, a condensed matter experimentalist at the University of California, Davis. These unidentified superconducting objects, as they're sometimes called, reliably show up on the archive. There's a new one every year or so. Advances in superconductivity are often touted for their potential practical impact on technologies such as computer chips and maglev trains, but Vishik points out that such excitement might be misplaced. Historically, progress in superconductivity has had tremendous benefits for basic science, but little in the way of everyday applications. There's no guarantee a material that is a room temperature superconductor would be of practical use, Vishik says. I don't think this will be the game changer for anyone. We already have the fraudulent health studies, replication crisis. Yeah, totally Alzheimer's plaques. Not familiar with the Aduhelm. I have to look into that. Yeah, so you're not, like, totally, I agree with everything with what you're saying. And, you know, I cover a lot of, and this umbrella review, like, specifically talks about the replication crisis. I'm pretty much saying, like, hey, you know, we got to do better, and, you know, not further make the replication crisis worse. And yeah, that Alzheimer's plaques fraud, that, you know, arguably set back a certain domain of Alzheimer's research back decades, for, like, pretty much a whole group of researchers. Whatever. Basically, many people based their career off that research. And then they're finding out, like, oh, there's, like, pretty much, like, literally nothing there or there. Oh, okay, yeah, so I know that. Yeah. And I have a paper, actually, touching upon that. But yeah, so, like, I know the FDA, let's say, approval issue. Well, multiple drugs, I think at least 2, like, in the past few months, have been approved. Like, yeah, I know there's a decent amount of controversy surrounding that. The first attempts to replicate LK-99 reported in the past days have not improved the material's prospects. None of the studies provide direct evidence for any superconductivity in the material. The Korean team did not respond to Nature's request for comment. You know, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but, you know, that seems a little bit suspicious. I can only share my perspective of, like, if I ever happen to publish something, and you know, it was being investigated, and whatever, Nature was reaching out to me saying, hey, what do you think? Like, I would, if in fact I believed in my research, and I actually believed I was doing good research, like, I'd be the one out there, like, defending it. Or at least trying to be as transparent as possible, saying, hey, this is what I did. Boy Meets Mini, welcome. Thank you so much for passing by. I hope you're doing well. Shout out to you. I was definitely lurking in your F1 stream earlier today. Or I think you streamed twice today, if I remember correctly. And I know at least once, because I was lurking the other one. But yeah, thank you. I hope you're doing well. And yeah, you know, again, if this actually turns out to be true, So, and that's where maybe it gets, I guess, tricky. Because, you know, even if it's turns out to be true, many people are hailing this or claiming this to be like revolutionary, of like this changes everything. But even then, presumably one of the experts here, this Innovishik person, is basically saying that, like, you know, there's little in the way of everyday applications. Where historically progress in superconductivity has had tremendous benefits for basic science, but little in the way of everyday applications. Like, even they don't seem to be, you know, someone who presumably studies this doesn't seem to be all that enthusiastic about it, even at the prospect of it being true. Of like, yeah, it'll be great for science, but maybe not as great as we think it'll be for, you know, again, everyday applications. But yeah, I would totally be defending my science if I believed in it. You know, if, like, you know, with every intention, I like produced good science. You know, if nature was reaching out to me, saying, "Hey, what do you think about people questioning your research?" Like, I would be saying something. I can see on a few possible reasons. I don't know if you saw the potential scramble to publish exclusive authors, potentially to get a chance for the Nobel Prize, so they may not want to speak for fear of slipping up. Or alternatively, they're trying to find ways to maximize profit from it, or possibly, yeah. I can totally, yeah. I can all see those as plausible, so that's where, you know, like, I agree with you, those are all possible reasons. But I would say those are all, you know, not good reasons. And let's say those are people, those are, at least in my mind, examples of people doing, you know, whatever, pretty shady stuff. Or, like, in my mind, maybe judgmental of, like, people, well, yeah, you know, people doing things not for the actual sake of science, but for alternative reasons. In my opinion, it's only useful for long-haul communications and power, or to efficiently shuttle electrons from PV cells to storage. And here is where, again, I have to plead ignorance. Of, like, you know, like, I know a little bit of the potential applications, but I rely on, like, people like you, Boy Meets Mini, and other people to be like, hey, even if this is true, you know, this is what it actually means. Or again, I'm relying on other people to, like, find out what's actually going on here. Can be very strong. Yeah, that's true. But I don't know, like, you know, I don't think the South Korean government, like, is it known to behave in that manner? Like, if it's the North Korean government, then I understand. Not that I would expect them to ever produce any sort of research in that vein. Although, who knows? You never know. But yeah, I don't know the Korean government's. I'll have to plead ignorance, but I don't know their track record on if they have any sort of history with, like, suppressing science, or, like, discouraging, let's say, groundbreaking research or any research from being shared. But that is totally a fair point. Something that I don't know about. 2 separate experimental efforts by teams, but what I would say is, like, you know, if these Korean researchers, and, well, yeah, they're based in Seoul, Korea, I'm assuming they have, like, some idea of how their government behaves. And so it's like, well, then why would they risk doing something like this? If that was a potential outcome. But still, I can totally see it as a possibility. 2 separate experimental efforts by teams at the National Physical Laboratory of India in New Delhi, and Beihang University in Beijing, reported synthesizing LK-99, but did not observe signs of superconductivity. A third experiment by researchers at Southeast University in Nanjing found no Meissner effect, but measured near zero resistance in LK-99 at 163 degrees Celsius, which is far below room temperature, but high for superconducting. Theorists have also entered the fray. Several theoretical studies used a computational technique called density functional theory to calculate LK-99's electronic structure. The DFT calculations suggest LK-99 might have interesting electronic features that, in other materials, have been associated with behaviors such as ferromagnetism and superconductivity, but none of the studies found evidence that LK-99 is a superconductor at ambient conditions. So it seems like there have been multiple groups that have tried to reproduce, and so far, no dice. As particular about South Korea, I could just see any major government wanting the first bite of the apple. Yeah. I could totally see that overall broadly. But yeah. What I would say is, like, I would be fairly surprised if the Korean government did that. But I would not be surprised if, let's say, for example, the Chinese government did that. But again, I can totally see that as a possibility. And yeah, I don't even know. Again, I have to plead ignorance of, like, does this actually have any potential security implications? I have no idea. Replicators first attempted to synthesize LK-99 following the process described by the Korean team, which involved mixing powdered components and stages of heating up to 925 degrees Celsius. The high temperatures and use of lead have prompted concerns about amateur replication attempts, which researchers say are dangerous. To confirm that material structure and identity, replicators used X-ray diffraction, an atomic imaging technique. The Beihang team concluded that their sample structure was highly consistent with that of LK-99. So it seems like, they were able to reproduce something, or at least, the bare minimum of, like, the physical matter of LK-99. A co-author on the National Physical Laboratory team, physicist Veerpal Singh Awana, acknowledged small differences between their sample and that of the Korean team. Our LK-99 is very similar to that as the reported superconducting LK-99 has. But Robert Palgrave, a chemist at University College London, says that both teams' materials differ from the original. Both X-ray diffraction patterns are significantly different from the Korean team's patterns and from each other. Palgrave, which, I know what they're talking about here. They talk about, X-ray diffraction patterns, since, this particular technique that uses X-ray diffraction. That's a fairly common, or let's say run-of-the-mill biochemical technique or biochemistry technique, or I should say, structural biology technique to, solve the atomic structure of proteins. So, and they're pretty much saying, like, yeah, what they're making, okay, doesn't seem to be, they're basically they're following the recipe that's published in the paper, and they're like they appear to be getting something different, as in, like, they published a paper saying, hey, this is how you make a cake. They try to carry out the recipe and they get, a pie. Maybe not something like that dramatically different, but it seems like they're not actually replicating the cake that's, contained in the recipe. I believe I've heard certain weapons and technologies become more practical. Railgun launching of planes, and as neighbor, they do. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. That's totally true. But I'm totally biased in that I pretty much only know X-ray diffraction. So generally speaking, it's all protein. You're absolutely correct. And yeah, railguns. Like, I only know railguns from video games. I have no idea how far they are, like, in development, or, like, how far along they are from, the concept to an actual, like, weapon that's usable. yeah, I again have to plead ignorance of like I didn't really even know, or wasn't really much on my radar, of like yeah railgun development, or railgun technology. Do, do. So uncertainty about the structure of LK-99 limits the conclusions that researchers can draw from theoretical studies, which assume a given structure for the material to make calculations. On the 31st of July, a theoretical analysis posted on Twitter prompted excitement among online enthusiasts. Sinead Griffin, who studies quantum materials at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory in California, shared her theory paper, accompanied by a GIF of former US President Barack Obama performing a mic drop. GIF or GIF, leave that up to debate. The optimism was prompted by Griffin's use of DFT to find that LK-99 has flat bands, a feature that indicates electrons in the material are strongly correlated with each other. Flat band systems tend to show interesting physics, Bishik says, so when a material is predicted to have a flat band, people get kind of excited. And this all doesn't mean anything to me. Or at least I can't really decipher what a flat band system is. Griffin later rebuffed the optimism, tweeting, "My paper did not prove nor give evidence of superconductivity." Other theory papers also suggested the presence of flat bands, but all of them suffer from the same assumption about the structure, says Leslie Shoup, a solid-state chemist at Princeton University in New Jersey. In a nutshell, I don't believe any of the DFT before I know the correct crystal structure. That's right. As in all of these kind of, it seems like they're simulations. And so it seems like they're operating under the assumption that, oh, this is the actual structure of LK-99, and then if in fact it's true, we'll run the simulation. But that fundamental assumption of like, this is what actual LK-99 is, may be faulty. And that appears to at least hold true when it comes to like, the research groups that appear to have attempted to reproduce the structure, and it seems like there's at least mixed results, if not largely negative results, of like, hey, we're not reproducing the crystal structure. Flatband means it has equal response to a huge range of frequency. Yeah, I definitely do not take signal processing. And I super appreciate that you're basically able to translate some of this for me. Yeah. Some of this, like that whole paragraph right there, was basically gibberish to me. Or at least, yeah, the flat band system. Griffin agrees that knowing the structure is essential, but she says that the structure found by the Korean team is similar to that of other lead phosphate minerals, so it's not too bizarre to think it possible. Even if future experiments confirm flat bands, the future does not mean the material would display room temperature superconductivity, Shoup says. The association between flat bands and superconductivity comes from other materials, such as twisted layers of graphene. Now, I know what that is. Slightly offset sheets of atomically thin carbon, which displayed superconductivity at negative 271 degrees Celsius, and feature flat bands. But this does not provide evidence for superconductivity above 127 degrees Celsius. And like, yeah, this is basically close. Absolute zero. Absolute zero is minus 273 Kelvin. Have 1.7 Kelvin. But yeah, this does not provide evidence for superconductivity above 127 degrees Celsius in the lead-based LK-99. Viral videos. The limited success of the replication attempts has not quelled speculation online. Unverified videos of samples supposedly levitating because of superconductivity have circulated as viral evidence, despite the fact that many materials, including graphene, frogs, and pliers, can exhibit similar magnetic behavior. Previous room temperature superconductivity claims, including one made in March by the controversial physicist Ranga Dias, have made headlines, but the viral attention associated with LK-99 has surpassed many of its predecessors. Frustrated by the atmosphere of hype, some scientists have taken to mimicking the levitation videos with everyday materials suspended by string and other props. I opened X former Twitter up one day and noticed a bunch of sketchy videos with little floating pebbles, says Eric Aspling, a physicist at Binghamton University in New York. In response, he uploaded a video featuring a sample of LK-99 shaped as a fork, suspended by tape. I thought, how can anybody be convinced by this? So, it seems like it's still an ongoing... Well, I haven't looked in, like, the most up-to-date, what's going on today. But I think this is fairly up-to-date. Like 48 hours old. But it seems like this is basically like an ongoing, situation trying to tease out what is actually going on. So I'm going to be attempting to follow that. And yeah, cover any follow-up news about it. Because I'm very curious. I'm mostly curious if this just turns out to be fraudulent. And again, if so, that that undermines trust science. Even though I think this is basically in the peer review process, and it's only been uploaded as a preprint to an archive server. So I guess there's that as like a glimmer of hope. But even then, like if this is shown to be either basically nothing or straight up fraudulent, the fact that whatever, there are still researchers out there that don't have a problem publishing either poor quality or fraudulent research. Problem. Most crystalline materials have certain frequencies they respond better to because of lattice structure, which impacts electron mobility. Humble brag, I've grown sheets of graphene and used a transition emission microscope to measure, which is super. So this I totally understand. The lattice structure, like the crystal, frozen water, or freezing water takes on that lattice structure. Is it? Am I saying it wrong? Or is this like a totally different type of microscope that I'm just not aware of? Okay, I think unless this is just like a synonym. But at least in my world, I mostly know that I know TEM as transmission electron microscopy. So I'm definitely familiar. I've never done any electron microscopy, but I have like friends and colleagues who have. Oh, nothing to oh, and Replicus, welcome. Thank you so much for passing by. How are you doing? Hope you're doing well. And I don't act like, for all I know, you're right. Okay. It is, okay. Fair enough. I was mostly just curious of, like, is there a type of electron microscope that I haven't heard about? Because I would want to know about it, and I would want to look into it. Because I only know SEM, scanning, electron microscopy. This is probably what like most people are most familiar with, or at least when they come to pictures like this. Oh, thank you for the X link. Yeah, so actually, I believe this person, I think they were like streaming on Twitch their attempts to reproduce LK-99. For some reason, I seem to like remember reading about that. Let me just catch up. I've also seen Twitter people that have claimed to replicate talk with each other, and they think there may be an unexpected contamination that makes it work. If I recall correctly, sulfur. We also did STM measurements on multi-layer. I'm not familiar with STM measurements, but I totally know graphene. With the famous picture with electron microscope, where the people from IBM, I think, wrote the company's name with atoms. I actually don't know that famous picture. You happen to have a link, if you want to share a link, but that is news to me. But I think this Alex Kaplan person, no. So tunneling electron microscope is a thing. Okay. Okay, scanning, tunneling, microscope. Yeah, this is totally news to me. So, Boy Meets Mini, we're essentially both right, or nobody was wrong. This is just like this is just a demonstration of like you know, our different fields. Like I'm siloed away in the life sciences with, you know, with my TEM. Transmission electron microscope, and SEM, scanning electron microscope, but I've never heard of scanning tunneling microscope. And so the more you know. Definitely gonna have to look into this. But yeah, not to be confused with scanning electron, which is yeah. What I'm familiar. Nobel Prize in Physics in 19... Okay, so then totally... Yeah. No. Definitely don't know everything about microscopy. Thank you for the link. Reficules. Appreciated. IBM Atoms. Never heard of this. Oh, okay. That's cute. Using 35 xenon atoms. I wonder how they confirmed that they're... but like, yeah. I know... Oopsies. This is why I know, okay, X-ray diffraction. You know, solving atomic structures. Like to solve protein structures, it requires what we call X-ray crystallography. Which was why we call it a crystal structure. And yeah, it's the 1.9 X-ray structure. The overall, like, same principle. It's just like, yeah, again, I'm siloed away in my biology, biochemistry world. So, you know, someone mentions X-ray diffraction, I'm just gonna think of X-ray crystallography. But I know. But obviously I know that it has way more applications. And again, the more you know. Yeah, exactly. No worries, tired from some racing plus running errands all day. Yeah. The weather... The weather's definitely interesting in my area. Where basically it seems like summer is essentially over. I think we got... If in fact it is over. Like, I'm not really even using my air conditioner anymore. And typically I'm using my air conditioner until, like, you know, September. Maybe like early October. Where typically, at least for this time of year, it's usually like 25 degrees Celsius plus, or like 35 degrees Celsius plus. And now it's basically mid 20, or like it's like basically just like 20 degrees Celsius. It's very comfortable, but it's super bizarre. But yeah, I think this Alex Kaplan was like was streaming on Twitch. I think there are attempts. I think I have to look it up later. Okay. Well, let's see what they have to say. A few LK-99 updates in case you haven't seen. Twitter Anon claims to have made the floating rock. People are getting excited. That's a tracker replication link below. 8%. Obviously, I really can't try and... Some of this is just going to go way over my head. Floats rock, still could be diamagnetism. But would be 10 times stronger diamagnetism than graphite. Manifold markets is up. I guess this is like the market tracking the odds of this actually being true or not. If you need to know how I feel, it's probably over. Sort of, I assume that means that, you know, they don't really buy into it so far. We're trying to replicate it in my lab over here in Paris. We are making our own precursors to ensure purity. We'll see. Verifying our spirit claims. Can't make this up. In fact, maybe everyone... Yeah, I don't think this person's on board. I'm gonna save this, go through it more in depth off stream, and probably revisit it. Canada is totally still on fire. I believe like BC is like under evacuation orders, or like large portions of BC. Yeah. This is basically posted today. Wildfires. Pretty much all of Canada. And even here in my area. There's a smog warning. My area. That's fun. Or whatever. It's either smoke, smog, or like fires, or like all of the above. What you know, not to be a doomer, but I'm pretty sure it's only going to get worse from here on out. Oh, Dorkimus Prime, welcome. Thanks so much for passing by. Let's see. But yeah, not sure if I missed it, but did you hear about Japanese running 2nd generation clinical trials for the protein SAG1 using small interferon? I have not. But if you happen to have a link, you're not obligated. If you happen to have one and you want to share, by all means. And yeah, I looked into Alex Kaplan, because again, I'm pretty sure like they were like streaming the replication efforts on Twitch. And I saw they appear to be, you know, pretty deep and reputable in the field. But again, like I'm in no position, like I can't even determine who the experts are in this discipline because they're not in my field. But it seems like he is an actual expert. Oh, Bob Marley, welcome. Thank you so much for passing by. Hope you're doing well. Always nice to see you. Basically, it was a thread where some... Oh, yeah, right. Sulfur contamination might be actually what work, which is why pure attempts might not be work. Okay. So it looks like they're still figuring it out. Everything. Yeah. Done with this. Okay. Well, you know, I think this is a good springboard to like this topic and like replication. Like so yeah, I think this fits perfectly if I can like, you know, make the connective tissue. Like, you know, we just went over of like, you know, this potentially, you know, on its surface looked like groundbreaking, you know, revolutionary research. And now it seems like we're in the midst of like trying to reproduce it. Like, is this actually true? And so far, it doesn't seem to be holding much water, at least from what I can decipher as someone not in the field. But you know, tries to like follow what the other experts are saying. Seems like most other experts are saying like, yeah, there's nothing here, or there doesn't appear to be much here. We haven't, you know, we haven't run all of the tests to like fully be able to, you know, confidently reproduce it, or, you know, oh yeah, meaningfully attempt to reproduce it. As Based Egghead pointed out, you know, there might be some other issues of like pretty much trying to get the right conditions to reproduce it, trying to eliminate all variables of like, yeah, we're actually putting in a decent effort to reproduce it. You know, they're really trying to answer the question. You know, they're trying to answer the question of like, is this potentially, you know, published research, or maybe soon to be published research, you know, actually real? You know, is this now part of our body of knowledge that can, you know, be used by other researchers? And, you know, maybe result in some great technological advancement. And I think, you know, this paper here speaks to that, of like, you know, it's really hard to come to, you know, confident conclusions or meaningful conclusions in science. You know, science is messy. And, you know, even the things that, you know, we just kind of like take for granted, or, you know, we kind of like take as true now, you know, maybe there's a little bit of, you know, an asterisk of like, hey, maybe not as true as we think it is. Or like, maybe we really do need more research before we start making recommendations. Maybe we have taken some things for granted. Or maybe, given how we conduct research now, you know, it's resulted in this situation of like, we're making recommendations based off of what we think is good quality research, but it's not actually good quality research. Oh, discount Seth Rogen, welcome. Thank you so much for passing by. Good to see you. Hope you're doing well. Let me catch up with chat. Also, people have said certain manufacturing details were omitted in the paper, if I recall correctly. Cooling. Okay, yeah. So it seems like you're way more informed of the situation than I am. And it seems like this is probably more up your alley in terms of like a field or discipline. Cooling is that, yo. Very sweet. Totally agree. Maybe this is all a media stunt that got out of hand for the yeah. So, like this, well, that's pretty much that is exactly what I'm covering now. This umbrella review, about, you know, physical exercise, on cognition. And they pretty much, you know, conclude that, you know, we should be cautious. But, you know, we have this recommendation out there, as they're going to cover. Even like the World Health Organization, you know, appears to recommend exercise as basically good for, you know, your cognitive or brain health. So like, where does this recommendation come from? Like, what is the evidence on which we can make this claim that exercise is beneficial for cognition? And this also goes back to, one moment, what I covered earlier, I think even last stream, of like, you know, probably better if I just, yeah, I covered sort of like, you know, the scientific debate, you know, another scientific debate sort of you know, being carried out now. Like, you know, we have this presumably scientific debate about LK-99. And then, yeah, last stream, you know, I covered the fact that, you know, I covered this paper a year ago. And then there's like, so this was also an umbrella review, pretty much coming to the conclusion that, hey, you know, this serotonin theory of depression, there doesn't seem to be a lot of evidence, or any evidence, good quality evidence, backing it up. But then there was an actual response to that umbrella review, saying, hey, actually, you know, your review didn't seem to be all that good, and that there is actual evidence for the serotonin theory of depression. But you know, it's a nuanced conversation about it, where, you know, the theory doesn't explain everything there is to know about depression, and it may not apply to everyone. So, you know, going back and forth. So, you know, in that vein, this was published again a few months ago. And so, diving right into it, they, you know, not to spoil it, but they overall come to like the same conclusions, and they're gonna summarize and end up more or less reiterating kind of like a lot of the same points that I've made in terms of like replication crisis, and that just a call for greater research, and that our current research climate maybe incentivizes low-hanging fruit or like poor quality research. Not my field, but I just have a science and research background. Okay, yeah, entertain. Isn't it very hard to specifically isolate whether exercise itself is causing improvements in cognition or just the active? Yeah. Well, so it's pretty much, I think, generally speaking, as like a good rule of thumb, it's like always difficult to isolate any variable when it comes to humans, or at least when it comes to human behaviors and whatever actions of like, since we're not locking, thankfully, or we're not locking people up in a lab and controlling everything about their life, but manipulating one variable. It's like, yeah, we have to like go by pretty much not great, or at least imperfect study design, and then with imperfect study design, we try to come to conclusions, and more often than not, I would say the conclusions are true, but again, you have to like, if there's a lot of noise or like basically BS to sift through. And again, this is not calling into question all the other stuff that we know about the beneficial effects of exercise. It's focusing specifically on cognition, or like essentially it's effects on the brain, or its processing capabilities. As I just went through at the beginning of the stream, there's still a mountain of evidence showing beneficial effects of exercise on reducing your rate of cancer, on reducing your risk of cardiovascular disease, and a whole host of other benefits. So it's just really zeroing in on exercise and its relationship to cognition, on whether it's an actual beneficial relationship, or maybe we were premature in coming to our conclusion. I.e., you do exercise, feel good. So not necessarily totally that's a part of it, but I've covered this before. Because we don't just go by that. We also go by, we have some other metrics. And this is coming from someone engages in a lot of physical activity, but and so like that umbrella review is sort of like speaking to research like this. They don't single out this exact research, but they're more or less talking about research in this vein, of like, it's like we actually run tests, like cognitive tests. It's not just like feeling good, but also just like your memory, your working memory, and like physiological changes at the level of the brain. We do have some neuroscience evidence or data to show that there's something going on. There appears to be something going on when it comes to exercise effects on the brain. So we're not just going by self-report alone. Totally, there's research that does rely on self-report, but we're not only going by that. Like, actually, there is some neuroscience research. I think it's fair to say that the neuroimaging data is not self-report. Now, some of this is like from mouse and all that stuff. So that's the trade-off. It's you use humans that you don't have perfect control over. You can't, at least while they're alive, you can't dissect their brains. Or like you go with a mouse, okay, and with a mouse you can perfectly control their environment. And we do, sacrifice them and dissect their brains. So, we can get good quality data and results, but then we're using a mouse model. And so understandably, there's a lot of questions there. Or we go with humans, and it's like, yeah, we have greater confidence that this is applicable to humans, but, we don't get the best quality data or results, because we don't lock them in a lab, because, that's unethical. and immoral. Also, doing exercise works motor cortices in your brain. Yeah, totally. And the brain's interconnectedness might be a factor. Totally. You're 100% correct, boy. And that is a valid question. What the respiratory effect, the respiratory system has on cognition. And I think and that's, I think, one of the questions to answer of, like, what might be driving some of these changes. It may just be a matter of, like, increased, as you exercise and engage your respiratory system. And, as blood circulates, more and more throughout your body, like, you just get increased blood flow to the brain. And, maybe from there, there's some sort of beneficial effect. Also, totally a fair point. I think many people are way too quick, if not majority of people, are way too quick to dismiss self-report. Yes, there's a little bit of a caveat associated with self-report, but, like, it definitely, as you say, I would say it has way more than a non-zero value. There's also novel structures in the brain that don't have a parallel in most. Yeah, that's totally true. So it's like, these are all, like, trade-offs that we have to make. And the same thing applies, again, even just, like, working with humans. Of, like, this appears to be typical of, like, the neuroscience research that, at least, that I have, that I've looked into. Of, like, yeah, we can generally get pretty good quality data from humans in terms of, like, scanning their brains, okay? But those types of studies where it's like, okay, we're trying to, like, look at what's going on at the level of the brain in these people, these humans, but then, understandably, they're recruiting, like, small numbers of people because it's very difficult to scan thousands of people's brains. Or, like, not very many people, understandably, want to sign up to, having their brain scanned maybe on a regular basis. And so it's like, yeah, we get some really good quality data, some high quality data on, like, these 12 or 15 people. But then, obviously, it's only 12 or 15 people. So, like, that is just the usual trade-off that we take.
Welcome to Flavor Country.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much for the follow, JC Madrigal. Thank you, much appreciated. Happy to have you here. 1 second. So, diving into this umbrella review paper. And yeah, totally incredibly expensive. 1,000%. And very often, I'm in no position to analyze or evaluate neuroscience or basically brain scan. But from what I understand, it takes some expertise to, evaluate that data, just as well, just as the data that I generate for my own research. Like, it's not just anybody can evaluate that. It takes a certain amount of technical expertise. And very often these researchers, like, they're not just doing research. They're very often, like, juggling other things at a university level. Even though it's, like, done by graduate students. But still, even then, like, it's a huge time investment. And there's usually, like, multiple things going on. So the physiological and health benefits of regular physical exercise are seemingly indisputable, according to the scientific evidence accrued over the past century. In addition, there has been a steady surge of studies reporting cognitive and brain benefits of regular physical exercise, healthy individuals across the lifespan. So they're already, I would say, they're coming in pretty explicit. Like, hey, we've propped up this pillar, maybe seemingly unquestionable pillar, or just people are now just operating under the assumption that exercise is beneficial for the brain, just taken as a given. These findings are driving current public health policies aimed at fostering exercise adherence in consonance with the World Health Organization, which currently recommends regular exercise as a means to maintain a healthy cognitive state. One would therefore dare to say that the positive effect of chronic physical exercise at the cognitive level in the healthy population is nowadays taken for granted. The question we pose here is whether those claims, policies, and recommendations are strongly supported by scientific evidence. So it's kind of like, not kind of, like, it essentially is doing a retrospective of like, hey, we've accumulated a bunch of evidence about the beneficial effects of exercise on cognitive performance, basically the brain. And then from there, we've made this recommendation that, has gone all the way up to the World Health Organization. But then, is that actually true? Maybe we should look back, maybe reassess. And that is essentially what they're doing. And so here are the affiliations of the authors. So there's multiple authors affiliated with this research. I can't speak to pretty much any of these research institutions. I assume they're legitimate research institutions. So, summarized in many narrative and systematic reviews, and a considerable number of meta-analyses, the main conclusions of this literature are that the regular practice of physical exercise boosts cognitive performance in children, adolescents, and older adults, with limited evidence in young adults. The impact seems especially prevalent in executive functions, although effects have also been described in other cognitive domains such as memory and attention. The magnitude of the effects tends to be modest, albeit reliable, and various factors might mediate and moderate effects. For example, exercise intensity, duration of the intervention, exercise training mode, and so on. This latter point is the principal caveat discussed in the articles, although the existence of the effect itself is rarely questioned. And I have some of research. Maybe not some of the exact research that they're going to cover. But I totally have, let's see. Yeah, I totally have research on, academic achievement and cardiorespiratory fitness, physical activity, in children and adolescents. And I have multiple, although this is diet quality. But yeah, as they say, there's accumulated evidence when it comes to cardiorespiratory fitness and academic achievement, are basically the effects of exercise on the brain. And so, this is research that I've looked into myself. Second. Although they are not often highlighted, there are also reviews in the scientific literature reporting inconclusive evidence for a beneficial effect of physical exercise interventions on cognitive function in healthy populations. For example, in their meta-analysis, Verberg et al. Found no evidence that physical exercise interventions had any effect in cognitively healthy older adults. The expert panel that recently conducted a systematic review on the topic also ended up stating that the evidence was inconclusive to claim that physical activity, a more general term that includes exercise, improves children's cognitive or academic performance, except for the case of mathematics skills. Diamond and Ling claimed in a controversial article that the existing evidence shows that aerobic and resistance exercise training, arguably two of the exercise modes advocated at the best to improve cognitive performance, are inefficient tools to enhance executive function. In this article, the Umbrella Review addresses the state of the art in this scientific topic by examining meta-analytic reviews limited to randomized controlled trials, the current gold standard to ascertain causal links, to determine whether the claims regarding the benefits of regular physical exercise on cognition in healthy individuals are supported by solid and reliable empirical evidence. So they're trying to look back, and it looks like they're going to select for, the best, what they deem as the best quality, the gold standard randomized controlled trials. And then from there, assess that body of evidence and see if it actually, stacks up to the point of exercise is actually beneficial for the brain. It'd be controversial, but would be cool if, for example, ResearchGate could integrate red flags for paper. Low reputation is authorized. So yeah. Although I don't know that I would I understand the broader point, and you may not be specifically, advocating for ResearchGate in and of itself. But I personally have that sort of an aside. I do have issues with ResearchGate, but in principle, I agree with you. And that's why, I sort of covered again, going back to, I think, what I covered 1 or 2 streams ago. Of like, replacing academic journals, going back to this problem of and the exercise research, this umbrella review that I'm covering now, they basically, touch upon this of like, hey, the way we publish our current publishing model seems to kind of incentivize, again, that low-hanging fruit of like poor quality research. So like, no surprise, we're making recommendations off of like poor quality research, or at the very least, not the best quality. But like, would I? And it's really tricky. Like on principle, like this sounds good, but obviously difficult to implement. Like I would have concerns. Like, do I think that it should just be by reputation alone? Like I know that you don't mean only that. I have no doubt. That there's more detail to what you're saying. But it's like, I would have a concern of like some sort of Yelp system, like for research. Like in principle, I can see it as functional, or something that would be good, provided it's like designed and implemented properly. But that is the major challenge. Yeah, no, I know you're just speaking of broad ideas. So yeah. And going through some of their, I think this figure is probably maybe the most informative. But yeah, they go through what's included in this umbrella review. And they also highlight the fact of like number of publications. And there appears to be, over time, what looks like this increase in publications when it comes to exercise and cognition. Where it's like, publication growth of Scopus index articles in the areas of psychology, sports sciences, neuroscience, and exercise cognition. So I mean, there's obviously an increase in publication number for all of them. But you see kind of like maybe a little bit of an exponential increase, even just like in the past, 8 years, or like 8 to 10 years of exercise and cognition. So like kind of like this explosion, maybe premature. And they're going over the publications that they included, going back to like the 1990s, and even then, it doesn't seem like there's a lot, at least not like hundreds or thousands, but that would be difficult to carry out. So I'm not going to dissect all of the figures. One, just primarily just because I'm not in the best position to dissect them. But like, they're basically, trying to get a broad overview of the research landscape, looking at, as they say, the randomized controlled trials. And they're doing an analysis. I'm not going to break down their statistical analysis. Because again, not in the best position to, dissect and come to any sort of judgment about any sort of statistical analysis that they're doing. So, what are their overall findings? In this umbrella review, we examine the claim that regular physical exercise leads to cognitive gains across the lifespan, after reanalyzing 24 meta-analyses of randomized controlled trials. So, they're doing like meta-analysis of meta-analyses. Well, hence, I guess the term umbrella review. You have these meta-analyses, so 24 meta-analyses of randomized controlled trials. So it's really broad overview of like a broad overview. So they included a total of 109 primary studies, and around 11,000, or exactly 11,266 healthy participants. We found inconclusive evidence supporting the existence of a potential cognitive benefit derived from the regular practice of physical exercise in healthy populations. Our findings suggest that the effect of exercise on cognition reported in previous meta-analytic review has probably been overestimated, and that in general, the available causal evidence from randomized controlled trials on the exercise cognition link is far from conclusive. So just based off of, again, randomized controlled trials, as they say, and is broadly understood, the gold standard in quality of evidence, at least when it comes to quality of evidence in this domain, it looks like it's, coming up short. This review provides a fine-grained outline of the exponential growth of the exercise cognition in healthy humans over the past 50 years. The rapid growth has provided insight into the potential benefits, risks, and pitfalls of implementing exercise-based interventions in the general population, resulting in a vast body of evidence. This evidence, often from underpowered randomized controlled trials and potentially biased meta-analyses, shows signs of unusual clustered-like growth. That is, meta-analyses on the topic do not share primary sources of evidence. So even like the meta-analyses, sort of similar, like what I brought up earlier, where again, there was this umbrella review, and this umbrella review on the serotonin theory of depression, they came to the conclusion of like the evidence supporting this theory or hypothesis, the evidence doesn't support it, as in they're essentially kind of like discounting or like brushing aside the serotonin theory of depression. But then again, there was like this response. This is published this year as a response, where they pretty much criticize this umbrella review, basically saying, hey, the way you conducted your umbrella review doesn't seem to be up to standard. And not only not up to standard, but there's a whole host of other things that you overlooked that maybe you conveniently left out. And again, a whole bunch of researchers were basically signing off on this. So again, are hard to tease out. But these researchers here in this umbrella review, they're calling into question, the body of evidence on exercise and its effects on the brain, or cognition specifically. And they're basically saying that the meta-analyses that we analyzed, they don't seem to be basically high quality, or like there's major problems with them. And we're like making recommendations off of these meta-analyses. So, meta-analyses on the topic do not share primary sources of evidence, where the beneficial effect of physical exercise on cognition has been taken for granted, despite the existence of several accounts that have shown mixed or contradictory findings. In line with recent accounts, we believe this exponential accumulation of low-quality evidence has led to stagnation rather than advance in the field, hindering the discernment of the real existing effect. Replication of published scientific findings is currently at the forefront of scientific debate. And again, I think this overlaps perfectly with this LK-99 situation. Although, from what I understand, that the potential publication of LK-99 or like the research about that has not gotten past peer review, or is basically just as a preprint currently. But even just as a preprint, it looks like there are other researchers trying to reproduce what was uploaded as a preprint. And so, but I think virtually everyone now knows about the replication crisis in science. And they're like highlighting it here of like, our current publishing system is basically, this is basically the fruits of our labor. No one's really incentivized to reproduce scientific publications. And again, you're incentivized for kind of like minimal effort, or like you're incentivized for low quality research. And that there's this stagnation effect where, if it's already taken for granted of like, if before this, it was just kind of assumed as a given that exercise is beneficial for the brain, and it's just like propped up, well then why continue dissecting that question? Or like, why continue investing research into that area if it's kind of like a foregone conclusion? Obviously, I'm sure research would continue to be done in that domain, to tease out some other, other questions. But maybe we need to like almost like go back to basics of like start at a foundational level of like, is it actually beneficial? Can we actually, demonstrate with confidence that exercise is beneficial for the brain or cognition? Since the publication of the seminal reproducibility project, Psychology, there have been many initiatives in different research fields to test the extent to which the empirical evidence is solid and reliable. The replication crisis has shaken the foundations of numerous fields and continues to question many of the effects that have long been believed to be true. This umbrella review is part of the collective effort to promote transparency, openness, and reproducibility in science. Here, we delineate the structural weaknesses of the exercise cognition meta-analytic literature, including the marked methodological, theoretical, and communicative issues. Below, we briefly develop a series of opportunities for improvement that may guide future studies in the field. Low-quality papers also destroy trust in academia and fuel, 1,000%. And that is one of the concerns that I brought up earlier when it comes to this, this LK-99 situation. Like, it's great that other researchers are trying to reproduce it, but again, if it's shown to essentially not be reproducible, and it's basically shown to be fake, like technically, at a fundamental level, science is doing its thing, but to the public perception, unfortunately, I don't think it's going to be viewed that way. It'll just be like, oh yeah, fake research is published. My biased personal experience jives with the idea that it's beneficial, but yeah, it could be something else or reverse causation. And well, again, as someone who exercises heavily, both strength training and cardiovascular exercise, just in the beginning of my stream, I was talking about how much I love running now. I didn't always love running. And totally, runner's high is a thing for me after, a running session. I pretty much always feel great. So totally my personal experience of like, I work out for multiple reasons, for my physical health, my mental health, and I also enjoy challenging myself. And so, it jives with my personal experience, but at the same time, it can totally be a placebo effect. But also at the same time, mental health is, let's say, different than cognition. That's where it gets like tricky. Of like, they're talking about cognition specifically, and I don't know for sure, but I think the cognitive aspect is different from the mental health aspect. And Bill Synthetic, welcome. Thank you so much for passing by. Well, that's a fantastic question. I have no problem saying that as of now, handstands are devastating for my mental health, because it reinforces, how much of a failure that I am, because I just consistently fail. Well, the handstands are just like perpetual failure. And so, totally not good. Well, for me personally, it's a hit to my ego. I'm not only metaphorically falling down, I'm literally falling down each time I do a handstand or attempt to do a handstand. Pretty good metaphor for my life overall. So I don't know for sure, but I think cognition is like a specific thing. I think it's mostly just like processing power. And also shout out to Bill Synthetic. Thank you so much for passing by. I hope you're doing well. Yeah, so I think it's mostly like in these aspects here of, learning, remembering, intelligence without, dissecting that reasoning. So yeah, I think it's mostly just like whatever the thinking or processing aspect, not the mental health aspect. So I think it's still, well, maybe some new umbrella review will come out saying, hey, exercise effects on mental health. Maybe the evidence not there either, right? Totally possible. Where was I? Oh yes. So the exercise cognition field has been flooded with individual experiments addressing this relationship on designs with low statistical power that yield estimates with low precision and stability. While conducting intervention studies with remarkably large sample sizes is not within the reach of almost any individual laboratory, for a recent high-quality exception, see Zocheva et al., simplification and standardization of experimental designs to increase statistical power and facilitate comparison of results and replication, proper active control groups, pre-registration, or multi-laboratory initiatives can definitely enhance the field. Yeah, I can agree with that, of effect size. Headline study show. Well, I'm sure there's a dose response of exercise, where if you go to the extremes, I can totally make an argument that there might be some increased risk of cancer. Or I can probably totally map out some sort of pathway. Totally. I think the conscientiousness aspect holds true of, like, generally speaking, conscientiousness, I think, is pretty strongly or decently correlated with overall, like, better health and better academic achievement. I don't think it's correlated with higher IQ, but I could be wrong about that. I haven't looked closely. But I think that is pretty robust, of, like, conscientiousness. I think they just tend to have better health outcomes overall. And they also tend to have better academic outcomes. But I've totally asked myself that question of, like, well, if it's true that conscientiousness is correlated with, better academic achievement, better health outcomes, and better generally speaking, better professional achievement, it was, like, intuitive to me that it'd be correlated with higher IQ, since those seem to map on pretty well. But then, at least when I sort of casually looked into it, there didn't seem to be, like, any correlation. Like, maybe, like, a very loose correlation. It's a little bit strange to me. And this is setting aside sort of issues that I have with whatever metrics, like, well, the Big Five and all that stuff. There's certainly an argument that folks with extra weight or obese have a better chance of being cancer. So I have actually, okay. Let me bring it up. Find it. Many things. Any links. Oh no, I have the original research. What am I talking about? I don't need to go here. Okay. Okay, yeah. So, there was this study, published, like, past couple weeks, whatever. This year. I think it was, like, published just, like, last month. Where it's like, okay, it's in the headline, risk of hip fracture in meat eaters, pescatarians, vegetarians, and whatever, spoiler alert, now they find a slight increased risk of hip fracture in vegetarians. And some of their explanatory well, one of the explanations that they put forth as to why you see this slight increase in hip fractures in vegetarians in comparison to meat eaters and pescatarians is because, like, yeah, vegetarians appear to have lower overall body mass index, and they tend to have lower body fat. And then from there, they sort of extrapolate, which, you know, it makes some intuitive sense of, like, well, if vegetarians have, you know, lower BMI and they have less body fat, well, then if there's less fat, then they're less able to cushion there's less fat there to cushion a fall when they do in fact fall. And there is some research also showing, like you said, that you know, a slight increase in weight, or, like, there is some argument of, like, survival rates when it comes to, like, cancer and heart disease, of maybe having a little bit of excess weight may be beneficial. Although I haven't looked too closely at that research, but I know I have seen some research kind of, like, pointed to that, of, like, there might be some advantage of being a little bit overweight when it comes to, you know, heart disease and cancer, where you might just have more access to resources to, you know, go through those experiences. But also what I want to say here is, like, the risk of, you know, the increased risk of hip fracture that they find in this research is, like, super modest. It's like, you know, I think, as they specifically say, it's like per 1,000 people, it amounts to, like, an extra 3 hip fractures or something to that effect. You need to, like, do... But yeah, the absolute risk differences were modest. Let's see. Yeah, it totally has been. I have no doubt that there's probably multiple locations since the last time I checked. If you're talking about this program is called Mendeley, or Mendeley Desktop. Pretty much, like, largely speaking, used by researchers to organize all the papers that they have and make notes, highlight random things. It's free. It's pretty good. The most biased and least humble sample, my dad and I think, are pretty likely to be above average intelligence, but bottom intention. I've seen others. Yeah, and that's where I think it's super interesting. I have no idea where I am in intelligence. I just kind of assume whatever. Statistically speaking, I'm probably average. But whatever, if online personality tests have, like, any value, and I have, like, tried to seek out ones that appear to be higher quality, I do appear to score high, really high in conscientiousness. But again, not assessed by any professional whatsoever, so I have no idea how real that metric is, or that result is. Mom was also very tough, but maybe 95th percentile conscientious. Which is like, yeah, if you have the best of both worlds. I think, yeah, I don't know. I think it depends overall on, not just, like, the specific context. Like, I can see an argument for a little bit of excess weight. I could also, I generally err on, you know, as someone who tries to maintain leanness for athleticism. Yeah, like, definitely there appear to be, like, some contexts where some excess weight is beneficial. That's exactly the main message. Eat more McDonald's. 1000%. Well, so I gotta be clear, I don't have the PhD yet. So obviously, you know, until I get that piece of paper, and anything is possible. And it's only after I get the piece of paper that I get the actual stamp of like, oh, you are likely in this percentile of IQ. But even then, like, again, as someone who interfaces with a lot of people with fancy titles and fancy letters next to their name, as I've mentioned in some of the conversations that I've had with, you know, fellow friends and colleagues, I might be judgmental, but those 3 letters don't seem to amount to much. Or like, you know, I've come across some very credentialed people who look to have very impressive CVs with like all the titles and all the letters. And maybe I'm the idiot. I'm totally open to that. But then, yeah, something doesn't seem to be tracking with the person and the letters and the titles next to their name. So it's super interesting to me. I don't know, academia, like, I mean, I know this holds true for everything. Even just my experience as a personal trainer. Like, I know very credentialed, or at least I know many personal trainers that, you know, they have a lot of certifications, and, you know, again, they have a lot of pieces of paper of all the courses and certifications they've taken, and it's like, some of those trainers, I would personally never recommend them anyone. But again, I might be judgmental. Yeah, I don't know. Obviously have a lot of thoughts on, you know, credentials. And again, as I've covered before, you know, the fact, okay? I mean, I did an entire stream. Devoted to chiropractic. And, you know, you can get credentialed in chiropractic, which is a totally bogus field. Like, I know that there are people out there that absolutely swear by their chiropractor, and have no doubt that for some people they're having some sort of beneficial effect. But I would never, personally, I'm not a doctor of any kind or medical professional, but I would never recommend anybody go see a chiropractor. I would always say, like, steer clear. But the fact that you can go to a university, and, you know, you can go and get a degree in chiropractic, it's like, well, what is this institution doing? It's very strange to me that a university can have, you know, they can have their department of chemistry next to whatever their department of chiropractic, or their department of whatever, osteopathic medicine. These are all very bizarre circumstances. I have a very similar experience, but it's only a correlation. Also, you can have a very skewed baseline, e.g. most people don't even... Yeah, true. Like, I know it's obviously depending on whatever location, country, etc. But I know it's only around, like, 25 to 35% of the population that has a bachelor's degree. But, like, and again, as someone who's been in academia for a long time, and as someone who has taught very many students, and I've totally taught biochemistry to students, that, like, I know they have gone on to, like, go and get into medical school, and become fully licensed, you know, doctors, physicians. And for some of those students, not a lot, there's a small handful that, like, I probably wouldn't trust them to be my doctor personally. Or, like, maybe as Bill Synthetic puts it, I've seen the wizard behind the curtain of, like, I might know this student too well based off of me teaching them, that maybe I've seen too much, that maybe undermines my confidence. But I also might just be a huge judgmental jerk. I don't know. But yeah, I'm super conflicted. All I can say. Is there a real term for a doctor who specializes in spinal stuff specifically? I don't know about spinal stuff specifically, unless you mean like a spinal surgeon. Those are a thing. But if you're talking about, you know, more on like the muscular or whatever rehabilitation aspect, probably an athletic therapist. At the very least, an athletic therapist can probably refer you to the appropriate professional. Like, unless you need true like medical intervention at the level of the spine, that's probably a spinal surgeon. I think. The fact that most people can't access education, I 1000% agree with you, Boy Meets Mini. And absolutely, this is not to denigrate anyone that doesn't have, you know, a university degree. If anything, I'm hoping it. I would probably want to give confidence to people that don't have a university degree, because I'm telling you that there's, you know, it only means so much. At most, I just view it as, you know, this person was able to like maybe jump through a few hoops and meet some course requirements and accumulate credits at an institution. That's basically it. Maybe, I don't know. I don't want to... Yeah, I don't want to believe in myself too much, or believe in my own BS too much. The exercise cognition field has been flooded with individual experiments addressing this relationship on designs with low statistical power that yield estimates with low precision and stability. You know, maybe on that topic, yeah, like, maybe there might be zero interest in it. But, you know, maybe just like at one point going through my transcript, my university transcript, maybe like going through my academic like history, and maybe even showing other things of like, I think actually I have a track record of making some predictions or being right about some things, even some things outside of my field. Actually, I think those videos, those clips that I sent you, Bill, I think are pretty good. Maybe not proof, but I think they at least can demonstrate that, like, I'm talking about the same concepts that presumably this other expert is talking about. But I was talking about them before this other expert was talking about. And maybe I predicted, you know, 1 year later, this person's talking about they need to, you know, focus on this thing. And I was talking about this thing with them a year earlier. And there's other things scattered around the internet, mostly in the Reddit world, where it's like, oh, I might have made some predictions that, like, they are entrenched in the internet that turned out to be true, or that I think turned out to be true. Maybe one day I'll go through those things. While conducting intervention studies with remarkably large sample sizes is not within the reach of almost any individual laboratory. Oh yeah, I already read that. But like, yeah, pretty much saying like it's difficult to carry out research like this, right? Again, like I said, we're not locking up people in laboratories yet. But like, you know, we're doing the best we can, but even despite that, maybe we can do even better. Notably, epidemiological studies are an additional important source of evidence that suggests a potential role of physical exercise in cognitive improvement. Nevertheless, such studies have also failed to show consistent evidence in support of the hypothesis that regular exercise boosts cognitive performance. While it is true that they have occasionally reported exercise-associated cognitive benefits, this has in some cases been explained by baseline differences. In other cases, physical exercise was not associated with any cognitive advantage even after years of practice. future longitudinal studies could help to discern the existence of a positive impact of regular exercise on cognition, as well the specific role of different mediators and moderators. Yeah. Do you really want that? You want me up here just bragging about me having like the best brain? And you know, I've passed that psychological test. What was it? Of like TV, you know, listing off those 4 things. Or you know, your cognitive test as a president. What is it? TV, VCR, something something. Yeah, yet not locking up people in labs yet. I'm not advocating for that, but you know, I can totally make a sort of a utilitarian or consequentialist argument of like, hey, you know, to really answer this meaningful scientific question, maybe we should, you know, lock people up in a lab, and you know, just carry out the experiment. Yeah, man, exactly. Not just any diploma, like PhD, please. In addition, it is important to cautiously reconsider the role, oh, and also, on, let's say, sharing my transcript. Like, I also have, you know, I have some documentation of, like, my experience in academia. You know, I've actually saved a lot of things. I've saved actually probably most things from my academic experience, including, like, reports, evaluations, etc., etc. And also, I've saved, I think, 1 or 2 pictures, where, like, I literally, have a picture of, like, a faculty member, so just to, like, set the stage. Like, during the PhD, you do what they call the comprehensive, exam, or comprehensive assessment. This is basically, an oral exam, as kind of like the pathway, on the pathway to the PhD. Or like pretty much as like the gateway of like, okay, you're qualified to continue on the PhD track, and we have confidence that, you know, you'll get there. It's typically done in like the first 1 or 2 years of your PhD. Just like assessing your competence. Like, are you actually competent so far, and do we have faith in you that you can carry out the research that you're proposing, that you're going to carry out for the next 2-3 years? So like my colleague who was doing theirs, and like this is basically an oral exam, you know, filled with a committee, faculty members, and pretty much without this elected set of faculty members, they are there to, you know, administer the oral exam. After, you know, you give a presentation, you know, I've been through this. After I gave my presentation, you're essentially grilled by, you know, this examination committee. And the presentation that you're supposed to give, supposed to outline your research, and like what you propose to do. It's often called the research proposal, because that is actually what it is. It's like you're proposing what you're going to be doing tentatively for the next, you know, 3, 4, 5 years. And they're basically supposed to test you of like, well, do you have like the foundational requisite knowledge to do that? Or like, do you have PhD level knowledge or some baseline PhD level knowledge? And like, is what you're proposing actually realistic and feasible? And can lead to a PhD. Like, yeah, you have your examination committee, and they're just there to like grill you, just ask you questions on the spot, and they can ask you anything. Like, they can literally ask you like things outside your field. They can start asking you the capital of Vermont, and it's sort of implicitly expected that you have an answer. Obviously, it typically doesn't go to that extreme, but it does totally happen where there are some mean-spirited faculty members that, you know, they just want to make someone look bad. Thankfully, not my experience, and I'm pretty proud of my comprehensive exam. But like, yeah, basically my colleague was doing their research proposal. They were in the presentation part, and their examination committee was sitting there. And then as my colleague was presenting, like literally one of the examiners / faculty members like fell asleep, like head down, clearly asleep, not paying attention at all to what my colleague was presenting. And I totally took a picture of that. They were sitting like right across from me, like literally like their head is like down on the table, like just as kind of like as outrageous as you can get, of like just this faculty member just sleeping as my colleague is like presenting. And then this faculty member is supposed to be asking them questions after the presentation. Maybe one day I have to blur out appropriate faces except for that one. Maybe I'll show that one time on stream. Off topic warning, I had to read political science research papers for classes. It's kind of interesting when you consider that the scientific papers examine government, not what's traditionally science. I mean, my colleague did pass. Thankfully. But like, yeah, it's like a really... And another story that I have of like one of my former colleagues. Okay, they were actually doing their PhD defense, and this was also during the question period. So like this is an actual defense, so it's also an oral exam, but like they're defending the research that they've carried out, not what they're proposing. And like so there's a question period, but it's structured. It's like there's typically at least 2 rounds of questions. Okay, and it's usually around 4 to 5 examiners. And so it's like, each faculty member gets like 10 minutes to ask a question, and then once the 10 minutes are up, they move on to the next one. And they usually go for at least 2 to 3 rounds, but sometimes they'll go for more if they feel like, basically, ultimately, if they feel like the defense is not going well, and they need to like grill the person more. But like, yeah, the main message is like it's a timed question session. And there's obviously there's basically an invigilator that's keeping track of time. That's and that's also saying like, hey, now it's question period, and we're now going to move on to question period, and keeping it structured. And the invigilator, to keep the time of the question period, they brought in, I think it was literally like an egg timer, or like a timer that ticks, like a clearly audible like ticking sound of like 10 minutes. They turn the dial to 10 minutes, and then it's just like 10 minutes, like it's like the 60 minutes timer. And this my former colleague is supposed to like answer questions as they have like that 60 minutes timer going, and then after the time is up, like there's allowed, it's like pretty much as comical as a timer as you can get, an audible like a ding sound of like, hey, time's up. And so it's like, at least in my mind, that's like a super high pressure like situation. Like, yeah, the invigilator goes, oh yeah, now 10 minutes for questions, and then faculty member, now is your 10 minutes, and they like turn the dial 10 minutes, and then it's just like, it's literally just an audible like ticking sound straight out of the 60 minutes TV show. Really ridiculous. And like, I don't know if this person was like the person that brought this egg timer, the invigilator, like was doing it intentionally, but I don't, like, you're either like malicious or like you just lack like basic awareness. Like, why would you subject someone to those types of conditions during their defense? of like literally, hey, time's ticking, and you can hear it every second. But yeah, discounts, I totally agree with you, and I totally have a lot of thoughts about, you know, whatever, political science. Where it's like I do take issue sometimes, or oftentimes, with, you know, the science label attached to political. Yeah, or they're just I think it's mostly just a lack of awareness. I hope so. But yeah, it's really bizarre. Where was I? Yeah, wrapping this up. So in addition, it is important to cautiously reconsider the role of meta-analyses and the extent to which their results shed light on this particular topic. Even though meta-analytic approaches have the potential to minimize some of the shortcomings of individual intervention studies, their results largely depend on the quality of the included reports as well as on the methodological decisions followed to estimate a particular effect. Thus, meta-analytic results do not necessarily represent the true effect of a particular phenomenon. As we show here, the particular conclusions from the different meta-analyses cannot be taken as the empirical evidence accumulated over years, but as selective slices of it. Right. So even though, as they try to frame it in the beginning, in the introduction, they basically focused on, you know, meta-analyses that were basically only looking at randomized controlled trials. You know, the gold standard, as they say. But as they correctly highlight here, like, well, yes, even though randomized controlled trials are held up as the gold standard, and even though we're only looking at the gold standard, we are, as a result of that, like, we are leaving out a significant portion, maybe majority, of the actual, you know, body of research that's out there. So we are basically just, our intention is like to look at the highest quality of snapshots, but maybe those low quality snapshots count for something, or like maybe the mass accumulation. You know, what's better, looking at 10 high quality and trying to come to conclusions, or like, you know, 1,000 low quality? You know, what do you have like more confidence in? But at the end of the day, like, they are looking at, you know, as they say, selective slices of the body of research. Moreover, subsampling all the available evidence, that is, meta-analyzing a subset of primary studies, might lead to unreliable outcomes, probably departing from the true effect. It would also result in a reduced capacity to assess the impact of moderators and publication bias on the final result. For conclusions of future meta-analyses to be translated into social recommendations and evidence-based policies, the reviews need to be as comprehensive as possible. This means that they should incorporate not only the knowledge from the primary literature, but also from previous reviews, bearing in mind that the marked publication bias in the exercise cognition field. Forthcoming meta-analyses should include greater literature contributing predictably with less optimistic results. So, you know, they're making the case. Literally, you know, not looking at, you know, the black and white literature, you know, the gold standards, literally like the gray literature. And also, as I think they're kind of explicitly advocating for, kind of like trying to eliminate or minimize like the publication bias of like, hey, you know, generally speaking, if not, I would say almost exclusively speaking, science doesn't publish negative results, or doesn't really publish things that don't work, unless it's shown that, you know, it was fraudulent, like it's shown after the fact that it doesn't work, as in maybe in the case of this LK-99 superconductor situation. But let's just say the intention there is to publish something that works, presumably. But like, yeah, you know, given the fact that there's this publication bias, you know, we might be contributing to this situation. And maybe, as they say, we should start publishing or looking at research with less optimistic results. Finally, at the pre-processing and analytic levels, there are many choices that are arguably preferred. For example, the use of an effect size estimate based on the pre-post-test changes to control for pre-existing differences at baseline. We also encourage the use of multi-level models, for example, robust variance estimation approach, accounting for the correlated structure of effects without averaging information and reducing heterogeneity by the identification of moderating variables in the model. Regarding the assessment of publication bias, factors such as the number of studies, heterogeneity, or the degree of publication bias present in the literature might affect the specific performance of the available methods. A reasonable strategy is to identify the plausible conditions of the meta-analysis and interpret, in consequence, the findings. As an alternative, methods such as robust Bayesian meta-analysis, allowing leading models, blah, blah, blah. Super critical to the main message that I want to get across. I think, yeah, wrapping up the last few paragraphs. The results reported here, together with the methodological and theoretical issues mentioned above, highlight the need to nuance claims regarding the potential cognitive benefits associated with the regular practice of physical exercise. However, the pressure for publishing is an endemic issue shared by researchers and mass media. Right, so again, pretty much speaking about the overall climate around publishing. And that, given the fact that your success as a scientist or researcher or academic is measured by basically your productivity in publishing, as in how often or how frequent you can churn out papers, peer-reviewed papers in journals. And so, again, you're almost incentivized to publish low quality research, where again the metric is just like basically the line on your CV that you can put saying, hey, I published this. I did the bare minimum to publish, right? To produce high quality, robust, reproducible research that requires time, effort, money, other resources, basically a large investment. And so it's like, well, if it requires that, but your metric is just, whatever it is that you can churn out and, get published, well, you're probably not going, again, as I mentioned before, you are likely not going to do your due diligence, or you might be cutting corners. And if anything, one of the stories that I covered, I think last week about this, the resignation of the president of Stanford, where it was shown that, there were glaring issues with the research that they were producing, that goes back decades, that it did result in their voluntary resignation, but like, yeah, this appears to be like all too common. So in both cases, there is an urgency for publishing novel and eye-catching findings to attract public attention, which sometimes leads to oversimplification, misrepresentation, and over-dramatization of scientific results without the nuances and limitations essential for proper interpretation. The exercise cognition topic is not immune to this. Transparent practices throughout the research process, for example, reporting bias-corrected effects, and accurate dissemination of scientific findings through the media would definitely improve the situation. Nevertheless, this is a necessary but not sufficient step. Without the willingness of researchers to transparently report their results and databases, the collaborative efforts of editors to publish meaningful results, regardless of whether they are positive or not, and the commitment of the media to move away from hyped headlines and clickbait, it is a futile endeavor. So, not a lot of optimism to be had here. Or there, change is not going to happen on its own. But again, as I've covered before, in like 1 or 2 streams ago, of like this call to pretty much either change or get rid of our current publishing system. But like our current system is like locked in, of like you have the publishing companies, the small select handful of publishing companies, and then you have the academic institutions. Then you have the researchers, and like they're locked into this cycle. Probably just like bring up the figure. Yeah, this figure here. Where yeah, you have the journals, the institutions, the researchers, and it's just there are problems at every level. But since generally speaking, you know, there's no incentive for the researchers to change or the institutions to change. We just perpetuate this cycle, and round we go. And like basically, no one's gonna make the first move because there's no incentive to, or if anything, there's a penalty if you do something different. Definitely, it's exceptionally unlikely that the journals are going to change because they're the ones making all the money. And so if it's up to the researchers or the institutions, well, again, if they're penalized, then it's probably not going to change. And that's why it's pretty much entrenched or locked in. Although an umbrella review is considered to be the highest level of evidence in intervention research, it is important to acknowledge its limitations when interpreting the results. This review focuses exclusively on the impact of physical exercise, excluding exercise programs combined with any other cognitive intervention on healthy populations. This leaves open the possibility that physical exercise may have a facilitating or protective effect on certain cognitive functions in individuals with certain diseases, such as Alzheimer's disease, or that physical activities that include both physical and cognitive training, such as yoga, could enhance the benefits derived from physical exercise. Right. So again, they're being very specific about kind of like what they're calling into question. Of like, yeah, they are calling into question, let's say, beneficial effects of physical exercise or physical activity on cognitive performance, but it's also isolated to healthy populations or healthy individuals, because that's the body of research that they assessed. And there's still a possibility that, you know, there's beneficial effects on cognition in, let's say, other populations, looking outside of healthy populations. And also, like they said, they're not looking at combination interventions, just like exercise alone on healthy population, but maybe exercise or physical activity combined with something else. Maybe then there's a benefit on cognition. Additionally, this review only includes randomized controlled trials, but it is important to note that other sources of empirical evidence, such as observational or epidemiological studies, should also be considered. Lastly, the findings should be interpreted with caution, as genetic and environmental factors may act as confounding variables. So, like, even they themselves saying, even though they're saying let's be cautious about, you know, a large body of research when it comes to physical activity and its effects on cognition, also let's be cautious about, you know, our very own research that we're carrying out here. In sum, our findings illustrate the current evidence from randomized controlled trials does not support a causal effect of regular physical exercise on cognitive enhancement, although it does not preclude it either. Consequently, and until stronger evidence accumulates, we urge caution in claims and recommendations linking exercise to cognitive benefits of the healthy population. Right. So, you know, they're being pretty specific. They are not saying that there are no cognitive benefits to exercise, but they're sort of isolating it again to the healthy population. Regarding, and again, they're not talking about all the other, you know, beneficial effects of exercise, again, on cancer, cardiovascular disease, etc., and mental health benefits. Regarding current public health policies and guidelines for the promotion of physical exercise, we strongly believe there is no need to appeal to the alleged, as yet uncertain, cognitive benefits of physical exercise, especially when the current meta-analytical evidence from randomized controlled trials suggests that even if the effect exists, it is notably small to assert its practical relevance. A Cohen's d of 0.125. Such as the adjusted effect found in the original meta-analysis, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So, like, at least even if it is found to be beneficial, at least given the current state of evidence, basically, the most optimistic interpretation is like, maybe a mild to modest beneficial effect on, cognitive performance or cognition in healthy populations. The benefits of physical exercise on human well-being, especially with regard to physical health, are in themselves sufficient to justify evidence-based public health policies to promote its regular application in our daily lives. Further, engaging in physical exercise brings not only physical, but also social benefits, as we connect with others by forging social bonds and participating in collective activities that give us a sense of belonging. Lastly, let us not forget the pleasure of doing something for its own sake. The value of exercising may lie simply in its enjoyable nature. Even though I agree with this, like, I intrinsically enjoy exercise, I think for many, a lot of the challenge or barrier comes from that they don't enjoy it. It totally maps onto my personal experience. I do think there's, I'm just generally intrinsically motivated to exercise. And that intrinsic motivation is like that health benefits. And as they say, we know enough about all the other health benefits, of which, there is, let's say, way more conclusive evidence about, presumably. Although I don't know if this a similar umbrella review has been done when it comes to, exercise and its effects on, cardiovascular disease or cancer. But, they seem to be pretty explicit here of like, we know enough already about all the other benefits of exercise. Like, we could just go with that. We don't need to, like, bring in the potential cognitive benefits. Although, maybe there still might be some cognitive benefits. But, and maybe with higher quality studies, we'll answer that question. And then, we can actually make that recommendation with confidence. And yeah, that social aspect of exercising, although to be fair, I definitely enjoy working out with, let's say, certain workout partners. I'm very specific about my workout partners, but generally speaking, I prefer to work out alone. Or like, a workout partner that can, yeah, they're not relying on me to motivate them. Or like they can like at least like keep up with me, or at least they're like enthusiastic about it. It could be there are certain people that benefit, but they're already exercising. Maybe when you, well, I would not participate in that. Or there'd have to be some sort of like massive cash incentive, which obviously introduces like bias. But that actually is a good question. How much would you have to pay me to stop exercising? It would be pretty. It would be pretty high. Don't get me wrong. Like, totally. I love. There's totally people in my life that I love exercising with. But there's also totally people in my life that, like, yeah, I would not exercise. Be like, yeah, I would prefer not to work out with you. Sorry. But I do appreciate, or at least, my former partner. Like, I loved working out with her. Like, that's pretty much how we met. We met at the gym. Because like they enjoyed working out. They enjoyed challenging themselves. And they also liked learning new exercises. Like, yeah, it was like a joy to work out with them. But like, yeah, but basically the workout partner that I don't want, it's like, again, they're relying on me to motivate them. Or like they're just like complaining the whole time. That's not gonna fly with me. pretty much the workout partners that I work out with, it's like, yeah, they want me there, so that either I can, like, support them, or like spot them or encourage them, or they want me to like challenge them. You'd have to pay me like quite a bit of money, get me to stop exercising. Like, yeah, if there was like a study for like a week, if it's like, hey, this 1 week exercise deprivation study, and like, sure, you don't need to pay me. I will do it for the sake of science. But if there was like an exercise deprivation study of like, hey, for 6 months, you're not exercising, I would totally need like a pretty large cash incentive to do that. And that's for multiple reasons. Like, yeah, I would need to be compensated for like the mental health hit that I would take if I stopped exercising. Like, you need to compensate me for the psychological damage that I'm gonna subject myself to if I stopped exercising. Yeah, totally. Case studies on injured athletes, and I've totally had I have had to take somewhat prolonged periods of time off from the gym, as a result, not really of injury. Thankfully, at most, I had like one mild wrist injury that I had to take like 2 months off. But most of my prolonged time off from the gym is, stems from like my disease. Just like my disease is acting up, and that like I can't really eat, or I have lack of energy, and until my disease is back under control, I can't really go to the gym. Where it's like, yeah, there was definitely like almost about a year where my disease was out of control. Or at least the most recent time, going back about 6 or 7 years ago, my disease was acting up, like, quite a while. That took some time to get back under control. Oh, much appreciated, Boyd. So that pretty much covers that about, exercise, and like, I think the main message that I think I want to get across, it's difficult to come to meaningful conclusions in science. That science is messy, and I think many people, understandably, aren't really aware of that. And everyone purports to love science, but then to actually understand how it's carried out at kind of like a boots on the ground level, and I totally have, even myself, mixed feelings of like pulling back the curtain, because like I think if people really knew how messy it can get, and kind of how arbitrary, on like some of the things that we do in research, of like, hey, we're just doing this because like for whatever reason, like, we know it works. We can't explain it. It's just like, and a lot of it is just like passed down from tradition of like, hey, this researcher did it, it seemed to work out, so we're just gonna also run with it. And I think, if let's say the general public, actually knew how messy it can get, I think it would understandably maybe erode even more trust in science. I don't know. And given how messy it is, or at least how messy I know to be from my own personal experience and what I observe, it's also, let's say, understandable to a certain extent of like, why such poor quality data or studies get published, because it's really hard to, again, carry out high quality research. You're dotting your I's and like crossing your T's, everything's in order. Like I said, that takes a lot of resources and investment, and no surprise, most researchers, given how they are evaluated for success, There's no incentive, pretty much, to, carry out high quality research, right? You are actually doing your due diligence. I think that's pretty much like the main message that I want to get across from that study and this whole LK-99 situation. But with this one, which I think is pretty cool, although probably not a surprise to anyone, about how, surprise, surprise, negative stuff on Twitter, or formerly Twitter, now X, gets shared more than positive stuff. But there's some interesting stuff here to like tease out, because it seems to matter, whether it's a public figure or just some like random user. And also, kind of like the difference between, content that is produced versus content that is shared. Of like, I think probably most people would be under the impression that, negative stuff is gets more traction on social media, or let's say on Twitter specifically. And so they might intuitively think that, well, since more negative stuff is shared, then probably more negative content is produced. Of like, what's produced is a reflection of what's shared, or is an extension of what's shared. But that actually doesn't seem to be the case, at least based off of this research. Of like, I think if I remember correctly, but we'll see it when we go through it more closely. Of like, it seems like more positive content is produced, but what actually gets shared, like the more negative content gets shared. And I think this especially holds true when it comes to like the public figures, or basically the people with the public figures with large followings. Of like, they're largely producing, positive to neutral content, but that's not what is gaining traction. What's gaining traction is like the negative stuff. That's what's shared or retweeted more. That might be one of the more surprising findings. Second, well, they start off right off the bat. Most original content on social media is positive in effective tone. Yet there's a growing realization that negative content is shared more than positive content. Users' increased tendency to share negative emotions inflates exposure to negativity on social media compared to its true proportion in content production. Overexposure to negativity is known to have adverse consequences at the individual level, leading to a reduction in well-being. At the collective level, exposure to negativity contributes to group polarization and intergroup conflicts. Therefore, it is crucial to understand the roots of negativity sharing online and its driving mechanisms. Previous research on negativity sharing has mainly focused on specific content-level features and psychological mechanisms that encourage the sharing of negative tweets. Here, we hope to tackle the question in a complementary way by asking whose negative content is more likely to be shared. More specifically, we hope to examine whether the association between negativity and sharing is stronger for public figures compared to ordinary users. We hypothesize that such association is stronger for public figures because they have distinctive characteristics that make their negative content more likely to be shared. Specifically, we show that two unique attributes seem to be responsible for the difference between public and ordinary users in the association between negativity and sharing. The first is the fact that public users have weaker ties, who are more likely to share negative emotions. The second is that public figures are more likely to write about politics, which is content that is typically more negative and more conducive to sharing. To examine these hypotheses, we first replicated the previous finding showing that original content on social media tends to be more positive. Second, we assessed whether the association between negativity and the number of retweets was stronger for public figures compared to ordinary users. We further examined if this effect was driven by a certain type of public figures. We then compared two user characteristics, number of followers and proportion of political tweets, and assessed which of these user characteristics were associated with an increased likelihood that the negative content users generated was shared. Finally, we tested whether the differential effect of negativity on sharing for public figures and ordinary users was mediated by their distinctive characteristics. So, negativity sharing on social media. I'm like, yeah, I'm not, so pretty much, I'm mostly going to read the highlighted parts. Not going to read this from beginning to end because a lot of it is just, stats, let's say their methodology, and I don't really want to, like dissecting their methodology. Good thing. But, I'm, for this type of research, I'm not in the best position to dissect their methodology because they're doing a lot of statistical analysis. But they're essentially, curating, and, collecting stuff from Twitter or X, I guess. And they're giving it a rating because, like, they're searching for, negativity bias or like what's positive, what's negative, what's neutral. So there is some sort of scoring. Like, how do you define or categorize a tweet? Or do we even call them tweets anymore? But whatever, a tweet as negative. So they, there's, let's say, they're using an algorithm or they're using a scoring system. It does appear to be standardized. They actually call it Vader, if I remember correctly. But like, yeah, they're categorizing tweets as, positive, neutral, or negative. That's one of the reasons I got off. Yeah, I definitely do not blame you. I'm still technically a user.
Welcome to Flavor Country.
Thank you so much, Agent John. Thank you so much for the follow. Much appreciated. Happy to have you here. But yeah, I totally don't blame you for getting off of whatever X and other social media platforms. I'm still on Twitter. I'm still on Instagram. And I actually started a Threads account that I'm very casually using. But I try to like put up boundaries on my use, or like pretty much what I share on Twitter is basically just my pretty much random jokes. I'm literally just like kind of making ridiculous jokes and sharing some interesting content, or at least interesting to me content. That's about it. And pretty much to share when I go live. I'm trying to kind of engage with social media in some sort of healthy way, if that's even possible. Or at least trying to engage with social media in a way that's at least not too destructive. But remains to be seen whether my experiment will actually pan out. Social media is harmful, but yeah, exactly, with style. So, shared content represents up to 75% of all content that people see on social media. It is therefore important to understand what context is more likely to be shared. Generally speaking, language that contains more emotional content is more likely to be shared. But one central question is whether positive or negative emotional language leads to more sharing. Which it's like, so, at least not a surprise to me. But like, yeah, as they say here, it's the more emotional stuff that's shared. And I think this kind of like highlights the fact that I think at our core, we are emotional creatures. Myself included. I'm totally included in that. And then I think, generally speaking, our decisions are, I think, largely guided, in my opinion, by emotions, or at the very least influenced by our emotions or our current emotional state, etc., etc. And I think that kind of like bears out pretty clear in the research. I tried to do that too, but met either drama or bad faith responses. A lot of car enthusiasts hate me now because yeah, there doesn't. So first of all, I'm sorry that was your experience on social media, but it doesn't necessarily surprise me. And I don't want to stereotype, okay? Like, cause I am the least qualified to talk about anything in relation to cars. I basically don't drive, and like, I don't own a car. I have no desire to pretty much ever own a car if I can get away with it, because I live in I live in the city, in the downtown core, and everything's within walking distance. And I'm pretty, I'm a big advocate for public transit. Maybe you should journal your emotions before, during, and after using social media. Make notes about what brought you negative and positive emotions, then based on the data. That is actually a really good recommendation, Agent John. And again, thank you for the follow. And I think actually, I think journaling is good overall. And this is also a case of like basically, practice what you preach, of like journaling. I know many people who get many benefits from journaling, and I know that is probably something that I should do, and yet I don't do it. I definitely fail when it comes to journaling, even though I have no doubt, almost certainly, it'll be beneficial for me. So, and this is probably maybe a good starting point of just like your feelings as you're using social media. I think that's totally fair. So yeah, thank you for actually making that recommendation. That actually might give me like a good starting point, or like, the lowest way to journal, or like the minimum effort of journaling, just as a starting point to hopefully journaling about other things. So, although some studies have suggested that positive content, such as scientific articles, Olympic Games posts, or news articles via email is shared more than negative content, other studies have found that negative content tends to be shared more frequently than positive content in other contexts. The tendency to share negative content can be found in different cultures and platforms, including Facebook, Twitter, and Weibo. So, the first reason is that heightened attention to negative content, also known as the negativity bias, may lead to more engagement and sharing. The impact of the negativity bias seems to be moderated by tie strength, with negativity shared more between weaker ties, while positivity is shared more between close ties. So, public figures and ordinary users. Verification status is one of the distinguishing features between users on major social media websites such as Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Verified users encompassed a wide range of public figures, including politicians, journalists, celebrities, and athletes. At the time of our data collection, the verification status on Twitter indicated whether a user was a public figure authenticated by the platform or not. So yeah, obviously, whatever. If anybody follows anything about Twitter, or now X, they probably know that, basically the verification status basically open to anyone, or pretty much anyone can get the blue check mark if they subscribe to Twitter Blue, which is like whatever, $8 USD. Although there appears to be something separate for like other verification, like a gray or like a yellow or gold check mark, but even then, I don't know how robust or accurate that system. The verified status of users changed on November 5th, 2022, after which every user was able to verify their account for $8 a month. Before the transition, verified users made up only a small proportion of all users. For example, Twitter has 229 million active users, of which only 420,300 were verified. Despite their relatively small number, verified users are central to the diffusion of content online. And I believe that's true, if I remember correctly, let's say from the data of like pretty much like most content, I think on Twitter or just social media at large, it's like, it's a small proportion of people that generate the vast majority of content. Uh, oh yeah, and I think I was saying something here about your comment. Sorry, Boyne's Mini. Got a little bit sidetracked. But yeah, like I said, I'm sorry that was your experience on social media. But yeah, it doesn't surprise me, and I don't want to stereotype. But from what I understand of, let's say, car enthusiasts, or from my experience, my limited experience of car enthusiasts, either like firsthand or from what I observe as an outsider, as like car enthusiasts seem to have a certain political affiliation that, you know, doesn't fall in the category of woke. And so I can see how that conflicts with you totally, just as it would conflict with me. But again, I might be stereotyping car enthusiasts, and I'm totally open to being corrected if I'm totally way off base. But that's why I say that what you said makes sense to me. The algorithm seems to boost black check marks more than any. Yeah, that seems so. Not that I have like whatever. I think like about 200 followers on Twitter, so I'm a nobody. But from what I casually notice, like before and after, you know, all the Twitter changes, seems like and I don't subscribe. I don't pay the $8 per month for Twitter Blue. But at least I subjectively feel or observe that my engagement has gone down, or at least, you know, that's just what I notice. That could totally just be my bias. So the present research, yeah, some enthusiasts are chill and progressive, most are conservative. That was my impression, but again, I totally recognize that I may very well just be stereotyping or just be going off of a very limited data set. Yeah, that totally tracks. So yeah, I don't think I was pulling random stuff out of the air. I didn't know. So thank you actually for the more exact, accurate numbers. Where it's like, yeah, pretty much like 10% generating pretty much the overwhelming majority of content. And that makes sense. I'm perfect with the source. Expect nothing less. Yep. None of this surprises me. And I'm curious. You know, I hope I set the precedent, or some sort of precedent. You know, you should be providing sources for claims. The primary goal of this study was to assess whether the association between negativity and content sharing is stronger when the content is produced by verified users. Well, verified users at the time, obviously, you know, maybe it's changed since then, right? Now that I think it's fair to say that there's been a major overhaul of Twitter since this, you know, even though this is published pretty recently, you know, published this year, it's actually published, you know, just like a month ago. But understandably, you know, the actual research, data collection, analysis, you know, took place, you know, probably a year ago or over a year ago. Again, speaks to kind of like the difficulty in doing research. You know, it takes time. Where was I? Yeah, the primary goal of the study was to test whether the association between negativity and content sharing is stronger when content is produced. So we further examined whether specific user characteristics, number of followers, and proportion of political tweets can account for this difference in the strength of association. So yeah, this was in, as I highlighted here, they looked at tweets in 2019 January. Okay, so you know, fair to say, a decent amount of time ago. We classified users into two groups: public figures and ordinary users, based on account verification status. And again, this is at the time when, at least I think there was, you know, this is actual verification. I'm sure there was some imperfection in the system, but I think it's fair to say that, whatever, the verified accounts on Twitter at the time, whatever, 2 years ago, actually reflected, what was on the page. That company is actually that company, that person is actually that person. Aside from, let's say, a public figure outsourcing their tweets to, like, whatever, some PR specialist. Triangulating a few classification methods, we further classify public figures into categories, including entertainment, journalists, news outlets, organizations, politics, sports, and others. So, highlighting some of the findings. As expected, positive affective content was more frequent than negative for both user types. As in basically for both the casual and the verified users, or basically non-verified and verified users, positive content was more frequent than negative content. Where it's like, at least I think there's some hope for optimism there, or at least that makes me feel a little bit good in terms of, again, they're scoring or classifying these things based off of something, but still, assuming that their classification is reasonable, which I have every reason to believe it is, the fact that positive content is more frequent than negative, I think that's nice to read, for me personally. The difference between positive and neutral content was only marginally significant. So still a significant portion of negative content. Oh, sorry, I read that correctly? The difference between positive and neutral content was only marginally significant. Gotcha. So I'd say, yeah, they have, there's positive content, neutral content, and negative content. Yeah, that's their score system, the Vader. Where I believe that's basically their algorithm to classify. Yeah, so you definitely almost certainly understand this better than I do. But, I looked into basically in their method section of, okay, what is this Vader thing? I believe that's what they're using. It looks like that's what they're using to categorize the tweets. Of like, hey, this is negative content, this is neutral, this is positive. Looking at the comparison between public figures and ordinary users, we found that public figures produced a similar amount of positive content compared to ordinary users. A similar amount of neutral content, but most importantly, less negative content compared to ordinary users. So, basically, the verified or public figures, they're largely the same as ordinary users, but one of the distinct differences is in the negative content, as in it seems like, essentially the verified or public figures, they produced less negative content. These results suggest that public figures tended to produce fewer negative tweets compared to ordinary users. Yeah, exactly. So looking first at the interaction, results suggested that higher sentiment values, positive or negative, were more strongly positively associated with the number of retweets for content produced by public figures than for content produced by ordinary users. This means that emotional content in general was more likely to be shared for public figures. The extent to which negatively led to, I'm not reading this, negativity led to more content sharing than positivity was also greater for public figures than for ordinary users. Right. So again, that overall sentiment that even though more positive content is being produced, it's actually shared, appears to be, that negativity-led content. Shout out to Twitter Blue for changing the name to X Premium. No better way to encourage users than forcing them to explain to, yeah, exactly, discount Seth Rogen. Honestly, I am not a marketing or branding expert by any means, at all. But I honestly don't know, what Elon Musk thinking. It seems like just the silliest rebranding. And again, I think it's fair to say that Twitter already had like pretty massive brand recognition. where they're no longer called tweets. You know, when I click on what used to be the tweet button, it's now just post. That seems, I don't know, really strange. Having established the fact that the association between negativity and sharing was stronger for public figures, we then examined whether this effect was driven by certain types of public figures. We found that negativity was shared more for all types of public figures compared to ordinary users, even in comparison to the subset of public figures for whom negativity was associated with the smallest increase in retweets, namely organizations. Negativity increased retweets most for political figures, no surprise, followed by news outlets. I think also no surprise. We suspected that two variables can explain why negativity is more frequently shared for public figures: the difference in the number of followers and the proportion of political tweets. Compared to ordinary users, public figures had more followers and produced approximately 2% more political content. This suggests that the follower count is likely a more salient factor in differentiating public figures from non-public figures than political tweet content. So, association between user characteristics and negativity sharing. We found that negativity was shared more for ordinary users that have as many followers as some public figures, although not to the same extent. So it seems like you know, there's a little bit of a variable of like the more following that you have, or like following has an influence, or the extent of your following has an influence on what you share. Where it seems like, you know, if there's an ordinary user that has a similar following to a public figure, it seems like, you know, they share more negative content, or negative content that is comparable to a public figure, but it doesn't explain like everything. But yeah, like it's similar, but as they say here, not to the same extent. We found that tweets that were produced by users with a higher proportion of political tweets showed a stronger association between general sentiment, positive or negative, and the number of retweets. I don't think that's all that surprising. I'm curious if they use Vader's default lexicon or one tailored to their dataset. The source code has a default lexicon. Thank you for the link, Boy Meets Mini. Although I suspect this is probably way outside my breadth of knowledge. Looks like R or Python, or I just sort of recognize this as some sort of coding language. Scroll all the way down. I'm most familiar. The Gate Dictionary. I should probably just search. 25% of the way. Okay. I could probably just like Control F. Okay. Here. Got it. Okay. So what definitely correct me if I'm wrong, which, you know, I'm more likely to be wrong in this instance because this is outside my area. But basically, is this like searching for these words basically categorizes it as negative, as in like pretty much, you know, this is part of like their filtering algorithm. Like if it contains this, then it's like likely or certainly to be categorized as negative. That's sort of at best as to what I can sort of extrapolate. So discussion. So in this project, we compared the extent to which emotional content is shared for public figures and ordinary users. We found that despite the fact that public figures tended to produce less negative content than other users, the association between the increase in emotional intensity, especially negativity, and the number of retweets the post received was stronger for public figures compared to ordinary users. which I don't think is probably not all that surprising to most people. Again, I think what would be, at least to me, was not surprising, but a little bit interesting. Of like, okay, yeah, more negative content is shared, but like what's actually produced, it's like more positive stuff is produced. Basically, what's gaining traction, or like what's more likely to go viral is like the negative stuff, or like what's more likely to be shared. This work supplements previous research on sharing of negativity, which has mostly focused on psychological processes elicited by negative emotions in tweets. Public figures seem to contribute substantially to people's exposure to negative content on social media. Whenever a tweet is shared, it is duplicated and displayed to the sharer's followers. Considering the fact that public figures have a much larger number of followers, and given their centrality in social media networks, their shared content makes up a large share of the material presented on social media. The resulting negatively biased sample of retweeted content then may lead other users to infer that the most credible and popular users on social media platforms use negative language, which in turn might negatively influence emotion expression norms. We might be creating an overall, negative culture on these social media platforms, or negative environment on these social media platforms, or maybe at the very least on Twitter, since this is only focused on Twitter or X. Disproportionate sharing of public figures' negative content could have adverse implications for both individuals and collectives on social media. Overrepresentation of negative information, such as negative news or online hate, cultivates a more negative evaluation of the world, potentially leading to a decrease in social trust and a reduction in subjective well-being. In addition, exposure to negative political content has negative collective consequences, such as contributing to group polarization and intergroup conflicts. I think we might be seeing that actually play out, in reality. Might not just be isolated to social media or Twitter. It might be bleeding out into the real world. This study's findings also provide an explanation for why the overrepresentation of negative emotional content produced by public figures has worsened over time. The increased sharing of negative affective content incentivizes public figures to generate more of it, thereby perpetuating the cycle of negativity on social media. Right, so again, bad incentives. Just as there's essentially bad incentives in academia or scientific research, or whatever. We're not incentivizing, the good things. The same thing seems to hold true here in the Twitter landscape. Well, if what gets shared the most is negative stuff, then you're pretty much incentivized to produce more negative stuff. That is borne out in the data. It's not the positive stuff that gains tractions, and that will probably get you followers. It's the negative stuff. I'm not an NLP expert, but from what I understand, the occurrence, sentence structure, punctuation, and other factors determine how negative and positive words are weighted. The sentiment intensity analyzer class has methods to calculate this. Reading the bottom section of the source right now, it's interesting. Results in the NLP algorithm is a normalized score for the text being gotcha. Super appreciated for that explanation. Limitations and future directions. The most important limitation is the observational nature of this study, which means that we could not manipulate user characteristics while controlling for others that differ between public figures and ordinary users, such as average emotions expressed. And also, we identified users whose negative content had the highest tendency to be shared. As negative content is in fact produced more rarely than positive content, an effective intervention should aim to prevent the followers of such users from disproportionately sharing negative content. One possible way of doing this is by educating users about the consequences of sharing negative content of users who have a high number of followers, or by providing them with feedback about their tendency to share negative content produced by much followed users. So, they're pretty much advocating or maybe making recommendations of hey, what can we do to change this situation? of like we might be cultivating, or if not outright encouraging, this negative environment on Twitter, and assuming we don't want that, which maybe that's not a given, but I think probably most people don't want that. So it's like, what can we do? They're actually speaking about developing interventions designed to minimize general overexposure to negative content by targeting the above-mentioned user characteristics. And so, this is, at some level, I think this is arguably some sort of like regulation, or maybe some educational campaign. Whether an actual educational campaign would actually be useful or result in meaningful changes, I think it's arguable. I don't know for sure, but I have doubts that just an educational campaign saying, hey, sharing negative stuff is detrimental, it would be enough to convince people to stop sharing negative stuff or even producing negative stuff. And if that's the case, do we actually regulate negative or positive content? I don't know. But I think these are all personally valid questions. And yeah, I think this like pie chart breaks it down kind of nicely. Color coded, assuming you're not colorblind. Where, yeah, in green you have the positive stuff, and just at the top you have public figures, and the bottom ordinary users. And you see, yes, there's more green overall. The neutral is gray, and the negative is red. And it's, so yeah, the original tweets. So in the public figures, for the original tweets, the vast majority, or like 80% of it, it's either neutral or positive. And then what gets retweeted, pretty much it shoots up pretty significantly. Like it's the more negative stuff. And the same trend, although not as much, but the overall same trend holds true for the ordinary users. I would just say more positive stuff produced, but more negative stuff shared. And yeah, as you can see, I looked at their sentiment analysis, that Vader tool, where we use the sentiment analysis tool Vader to estimate the affective content of tweets. Vader was specifically developed for sentiment analysis in social media and is especially suited for short text such as those posted on Twitter. For each tweet, Vader returns a categorization of the content's overall valence, positive, neutral, and negative, as well as continuous sentiment score ranging from -1 extremely negative to +1 extremely positive. And yeah, funding, there doesn't appear to be at least any major conflict of interest when it comes to funding. So obviously, I'm definitely in no position to comment on this sentiment analysis tool called Vader. I think is a pretty interesting name for a sentiment analysis tool. But yeah, seems like it's an algorithm. And so yeah, they are scoring things as positive, neutral, or negative. And even there, it seems like there is a spectrum of like extremely negative to extremely positive. I just kind of assume that this algorithm is like reasonable. I'm sure it's probably not perfect, as no algorithm or no human is. But I think it's probably a decent way. Oh, your boy Heavy T, thank you so much for passing by. Welcome. I hope you're doing well. Right now we're wrapping up this study on negative sentiments on social media, specifically on Twitter, formerly X. But yeah, like I said, there's probably imperfections on this Vader tool, but you gotta go with what you have, and this is probably the best tool for the job. As they say, this is specifically developed for sentiment analysis in social media. So I have no doubt that it's probably doing a good job, almost certainly better than any human. So how do you scan social media efficiently as a human? And then basically, if you required humans to go in and categorize tweets as either positive, negative, or neutral, I think most people will probably take an issue with that, and that's too subjective. So I think that's actually all the content that I wanted to cover. I've covered that umbrella review. Here's just an article commenting on it, but I think I did a deep enough dive. Yeah. And I covered, the LK-99 situation a little bit. And then, that social media study. And surprise, surprise. Negativity gains traction on Twitter. But I think maybe a little bit, like I said, the mild surprise is that more positive content is actually produced. On that, maybe, at our core, we're not so negative, or at the very least of the content that we produce, there is some positivity there that is borne out clearly in the data. It just so happens that, like you say, Boy Meets Mini, it doesn't sell. We produce it, and maybe we enjoy producing it, but it doesn't gain traction. But hopefully we can change that. Which is another, and that goes back to what I was saying in terms of, this climate. And I myself, I'm trying to find a balance between even just the content that I cover. I personally don't want to be all doom and gloom. And as much as I advocate for my, political positions, and I actually go on debate panels and stuff like that, and I discuss things. But I still want to share, positive stuff. And overall, hopefully, create more positivity, negativity. Whether it actually gains traction or not, different story. But that's why I sort of cover, some of the health and fitness stuff. And I also cover content about self-compassion, gratitude, and a whole bunch of other mental health research. Well, I'm hoping, again, I have no grand ambitions, but at the very least, I do try to go by the principle of be the change that you want to see in the world. And there's a lot to complain about, and there's totally a lot I can complain about, and there's totally a time and place for complaining, and, being negative, and sharing your negative emotions. But I would say if that's all you're doing, I don't know if that's all that productive, personally. And that's just my opinion. And maybe I'm the negative one. So I think that's all the content I wanted to cover. Let's see if we can find someone to raid out to. So I plan to stream next on Tuesday, and I've posted a schedule in the Discord of my upcoming streaming schedule. I've actually made a graphic. I'm kind of experimenting with making graphics and seeing if I can actually make graphics. Let's see if I can find someone to raid into. Oh, Prime Kai's is streaming. Looks like he's trying something new. I think I'm gonna raid into that. Gonna set that up. But yeah, I want to thank everyone that passed by. Boy Meets Mini, always a pleasure. Super appreciated. Your boy Heavy T, thank you so much for passing by. Nice to see you. Bill Synthetic, Based Egghead, thank you so much for passing by, and all the great questions, and all the resources that you shared. Super appreciated. Agent John, thank you so much for the follow and passing by, and also this journal recommendation. Discount Seth Rogen, and anybody else that I forgot. Oh yeah, Bob Marley, I know I'm forgetting a bunch of people. And yeah, I plan to stream next on Tuesday. I have a lot of content that I still want to cover, and there's an ever accumulating amount of content and science that I want to cover. And I think a lot of cool research that I plan to cover. But you know, your opinion may vary. But yeah, we're gonna raid into Prime. Gonna set that up. So yeah, if you're not following Prime, I don't know for sure, but in all likelihood, I will actually be there tomorrow evening on one of his panels, since I'm typically invited. Where I think it's pretty much like a greater than 95% chance that I'll be there tomorrow. I'm not going to be streaming it on my end, since out of respect for Prime and my own audience, I try to just focus on the panel. But if you're not following Prime, you should be. And yeah, thank you everyone, super appreciated, and until next time, take care, be well, and be kind.
That I've seen would say, yeah, but for certain types of women, it's for affluent white women mostly, and affluent white women in cities mostly.